Well, good afternoon, everyone. Just before I call the meeting to order, I would like to make a recognition that we haven't done here in Council Chamber yet. It still is a work in progress. I just heard it at our DIAC pre-meeting, and it's a little different than the one that we've been using at events, but I'm going to read it now. This land was once settled by the Attawandaron people. Later, the Algonquin and the Haudenosaunee people used these lands as their traditional hunting grounds. The three long-standing indigenous groups of this region are the Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee people, and the Lenni Lenape people. I'd also like to recognize the three First Nation communities neighboring the City of London: Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. In closing, I would like to acknowledge that there are many long-standing treaty relationships between Indigenous nations and Canada, including the pre-Confederation treaty known as the London Township Treaty of 1796. We all have a role to play in honoring these treaties and contributing to reconciliation. Miigwech, Yawango, Anishik. Thank you. I'll now look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. On the CAPS report, item number 2.6, pertaining to Ontario Works in Employment Innovations, I declare that because I'm the Executive Director of a social service agency that deals with OW.
Any others? Colleagues, again, a reminder that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication support for Council, Standing Committee, or Advisory Committee meetings, and also information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or call 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And now, as we call our final Council meeting of this term to order, I'd ask that we all rise for the singing of the National Anthem, led by Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we have a large crowd today, so I hope I won't be singing a cappella. Please join me in our National Anthem. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Now, we always give our guests applause after singing the National Anthem, but we've never given Deputy Mayor Paul Hubert. Colleagues, today we have two separate recognitions. Today we are celebrating individuals and organizations that are making London a more open, inclusive, and diverse city. It's exciting to see individuals and businesses and community groups go the extra mile to help benefit our community, to help make our community stronger. Joining us this evening, we welcome, and please come on out, Justine Turner, Robin Armistead, Jillian Spence, Anthea Fordyce, Rita Van Every, Paula Jesty, Rochelle Cornelius, and Sandy Albert. and Brian Hill, and a few other people. Great to see you. These individuals standing here with all of us today work endlessly to make London a welcoming city by promoting diversity and race relations in our community. They continue to strive to ensure our city is inclusive to all individuals. One of the strategic areas of focus of our four-year strategic plan is strengthening our community. A key component to the success of this is making London a diverse, inclusive, and welcoming city, which is outlined within that strategic plan. So, on behalf of Council and on behalf of the entire City of London, a congratulations and a thank you to all of you for being this year's recipients of the Diversity, Race Relations, and Inclusivity Award. The programs and initiatives that are being recognized today are examples of what we want London to look like for years to come. An incredible amount of work has happened in this area over the past 4 years and over our recent history. But we are nowhere near where we need to be. And it's because each and every one of you are working hard, are pushing passionately, are advocating, and are teaching our community the direction that we need to go. And so again, on behalf of City Council and our entire community, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you. And so, we have the first award is to the Namarind London Friendship Centre. Please come forward. Doesn't matter what I tell you.
Sagoli Sagwe, Siwishi Gliding Gets. I'd just like to take an opportunity to, on behalf of the staff and board of the Namarind Friendship Center, to acknowledge the fact that we're being recognized in this place today. I know over the last 4 years, mayor, city council, and even the police, those doors have been opened for us a little bit wider. We've been welcomed in to be participants, to be working alongside these people more closely, and it's been amazing. Amazing 4 years. I know I repeatedly, every time I see Matt, I always talk about that, about how grateful we are that it's that time that we have, that we're able to be part of this whole big city now, even though the City of London grew up around us, enveloped us, and to some certain extent pushed us aside. But we're coming back, and we're coming back stronger. And it's with the efforts of the staff, a lot of staff at the Namarind Friendship Center, with these three young ladies and this gentleman beside me here. It's their efforts that make my job easier at the board level, because these people here are there every day, working hard, promoting the health and wellness of our youth, and it's through that work that is making our community stronger, the Indigenous community, and it's making it easier for us to get involved, to be participants, and to help out where we can. And I look forward to the next 4 years with the new council, and I'm looking forward to, in addition to the Namarind family here shortly, we're going to be taking on a certain gentleman who's going to be helping us with our youth as well, and I look forward to that. Again, I'd like to thank the city, the mayor, the councillors, some of the councillors that I've worked with in the past. I look at them as my friends now, rather than just councillors. And it's the same thing with my friend here, Matt, because that's who he's become. Sure, he's the mayor. Sure, he has all these titles. Two more weeks, okay? I'll take that. But, going forward, those friendships we built over the last 4 years with these people have made us stronger, allowed us to have that opportunity to have our voices heard to a wider audience rather than just, in the small offices or small meeting rooms around. So now here we are in city council chambers. I've sat up there a few times and listened to the discussions down here, made some faces, and felt you guys can do better than that, and they did, and they have done. And again, it's that work and that recognition of the work that we do at NAMRIC, that these people do, the rest of our 30 some odd staff that we have there, and all the programs that we do run. I've been involved with the NAMRIC Friendship Center for quite a long time, almost 40 years now, as a volunteer. And it's amazing. It's amazing to be recognized by this city for the work and the effort that we put forward, trying to be thought of as equal, be thought of as regular citizens of this city. There's still a lot more work to be done. And, with the help of our great staff and our friends, that work will continue. Uncle.
Of course, that award was to the Namarin Friendship Center for recognition for their Youth First Culture Exchange program. Congratulations again, and thank you. And next, congratulations to My Sister's Place on their recognition for their initiative helping women, helping people. I'd like to invite Rita Van Every to accept this award. Want to say a few words? Please go ahead.
Sego Saguli. I just don't want it to hit me. My Sister's Place turned 14 years young in October. It took 10 years for the making of My Sister's Place with community partners, with women of lived experience. We went to Toronto to see Sistering. And so and we were really lucky to get a house donated to us on Dundas Street across from the police station. So we're really very lucky in order to inspire women. It's a women's only safe day space. We work with vulnerable women with homelessness, addictions, and a lot of anxiety, a lot of just need a hand up. We help out with basic needs, and we help them wherever they're at. Sometimes it's housing, taking them to a housing appointment, going out grocery shopping, going to a dental appointment. It's whatever their needs are with no judgments. And so I'd like to thank the City of London for recognizing us, and for Sheila, who nominated My Sister's Place for this awesome award. And we thank you for all of your hard work as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And next up, congratulations to the Emancipation Day organizers. They have an initiative that focuses on Emancipation Day here in London. I'd like to invite up Justine Turner, Amso Yao, Robin Armistead, and Jillian Spence to accept this award. This, there we go. say a few words? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Matt Brown, City Councilors, DIAC, and award winners. This is lovely. The Emancipation Day Award it's amazing to get this award. I want to first recognize Amber Matthews, who was a lady that was out this year to see the Emancipation Day at Westminster Ponds and was blown away, for lack of a better word, and she contacted me and asked my permission to nominate me for the event. So thank you, Amber, for that. I really appreciate it. Very quickly, I'm standing here because of my great-grandparents who started this celebration in 1948 here in London, Ontario at Springbank Park. Emancipation Day, of course, is the celebration of the freedom of slavery when the slaves were emancipated and the proclamation was implemented. My great-grandparents celebrated this event in 1948. It continued down the road to my grandmother, and then to my parents, and then to myself. It went on a hiatus for almost 13 years, but this is something very significant to know. The majority of the City of London used to come out to this event back in 48, going on for 30 consecutive years. My grandmother, before she passed away, about 2 months before she passed away suddenly, she told me, Justine, I was 12 at the time, she said, you're going to organize this one day, and I was 12. And it took until 2013, so 1982 she told me this, and she passed in 82. In 2013, I rebirthed Emancipation Day. So I take this from my grandmother, Evelyn Johnson, too, and my parents who are here today. So thank you very much, and hope to see you there next year.
Thank you again. Thank you. Next, congratulations to the London Police Service for their initiative, Police Ethnic and Cultural Exchange. It stands for PEACE. It's the PEACE team. I'd like to invite Anthea Fordyce up to receive this recognition. Over to you.
Okay. Shorter, so I'll turn it down a bit.
I think it has sort of one setting.
One set. Go up on my tongue. So I have written a speech because as a police officer, I'd hate to leave out any detail. My friends here were able to do it off the cuff, but I'm not so talented. So first of all, I'd like to thank Teresa a lot, our diversity officer. She works tirelessly with regards to youth in our community. She's been absolutely fantastic with regards to our Yippee program as well as our Peace program, which are the two youth programs that we run in our organization. So I've been the coordinator for Peace for 3 years. So I'm up here by myself. My colleagues are in the gallery there cheering me on. However, the Peace team is definitely a huge team effort. It's not just myself that runs the program. It's a team of us that come together to make sure the 7-week summer program that we provide for high school students in the city is successful, and they get as much out of it as we do. They're usually a bunch of energetic, motivated, fun teenagers who like to eat a lot of pizza in the summer, but we have a very good time with them, and it's a great opportunity for them to explore different segments of the organization, and also for us to gain an incredible amount of knowledge about the different diverse communities in our city. So we definitely learn as much from them as they do from us, and in hopes that hopefully they will join our service at some point in the future once they make those decisions for post-secondary. The Peace program has been a very important community initiative for the organization as well as different students in our community. It's an opportunity for exchange of cultures and ideas between the police and the public. And this year was incredibly special for the program, thanks to Teresa and our friends at the Namarine Centre. We had an opportunity to have 3 days of Native awareness and Indigenous teachings from the Namarine Centre, and it was absolutely fantastic. I can say I've been a police officer for 15 years, and I can tell you that this was probably one of the most amazing summers I've had, and that was thank you to you for what you've done. We had We had teachings from elders. We learned about water ceremonies, fire ceremonies, and for me, it was something I want to take my own children to next summer, if I can, for them to really get an awareness and appreciation for the cultures we have in our city. So in conclusion, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everybody here at City Hall. It's an honour for the London Police Service to receive this award. We feel incredibly special and appreciated, and we definitely appreciate all the work that people do to make this programme a success. Miigwech to my friends from Namarine, and thank you to the Mayor and my colleagues who have made this really a successful programme, and hopefully going forward it will continue to be just as successful. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, it's a congratulations to the MI Understanding on their recognition for their initiative, Pride Understanding. I would like to invite Paula Jesty up to accept this award.
Thank you very much. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Can you tell people a bit about your program?
So MI Understanding started off as a mental health communications tool to start an early conversation. We came up with the idea that if we did a communication start in a bit of a different way, kind of leaned on some old friends we had in the Muppet Show, and came up with a dog and a chicken, could we create stories in partnership with support from LHSC to start an early conversation when it came to kids' mental health? So all of a sudden, a dog and a chicken were talking about anxiety, and they were talking about change, and they were talking about things that children 12 and under were struggling with. And what we found was the hands went up. Because if a dog and a chicken are going to talk about anxiety, we can too. So we developed 5 videos, a free resource for families, and we followed up with a community exhibit where we traveled now to almost 70 schools within southwestern Ontario, giving out free resources to families to recognize those early signs. And what we found when we were doing this is that families were coming up to us and saying, yeah, we're dealing with some anxiety, but I think it's a gender identity issue and we're really not sure where to go next. So we came back and thought, you know, if we're going to deal with mental health, we've got to deal with it across the spectrum. And we partnered with our friends at Pride London Festival, and we came up with 3 videos, another dog, a bunny at this time, and we created videos dealing with gender identity, same-sex marriage, and transgender, focused on families and children 12 and under. The videos are simple and they're straightforward. Don't assume everyone is the same. Accept everyone for who they are. And if you've got a friend who has the courage to be who they are, they're a pretty good friend to have. The videos have created safe environments to ask respectful questions. One of the puppeteers has worked years in the industry, started off on Mr. Rogers years ago, or Mr. Dressup, said, 30 years as a puppeteer, I've never had a puppeteer say, questions are good as long as they're not about your private parts. That's nobody's business. But it's important questions to ask, and it's an important platform for young children before they hit a point where there is the discrimination. They have an opportunity to ask those questions. I've now lived in London for almost 19 years. I came here the idea was I was going to come for 2 years and develop a morning show and then get the heck out of Dodge. And here I am 19 years later, and it's been a beautiful city to raise my children, and it's been a phenomenal city to create this initiative. We are a city that has a lot to learn, but I really think we're a city that has a lot to teach as well. As I look around and as we go into the community with this initiative, I'm inspired to continue to build acceptance understanding, to really use this resource to teach the community and the next generation the importance of acceptance and the importance of understanding before the discrimination hits. And so our goal moving forward is to continue to develop this initiative here in London, Ontario. And thank you very much for this award.
Thank you. Why don't we all do a picture? If we come together here and we'll ask Christine. That way, okay. So Christine, do you want to come over here? So come on over this way. How are we, okay? Well, there is one more recognition for this evening, and as we approach December 25th, you can appreciate the kinds of demands that are on this person's time. Today, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Claus to Council Chambers. Welcome. Welcome. Mrs. Claus has won the Senior of the Year award from ParaMed, and I'd like all of us to recognize her for her volunteerism in our community. At 88 years young, she is truly an inspiration. Mrs. Claus is part of an amazing organization called Angels in the Night. This group cares and volunteers for those experiencing homelessness in our community. And in addition to that, Mrs. Claus volunteers every Saturday in December in Cherry Hill Mall with Santa Claus. I'd like all of us to take an opportunity to applaud Mrs. Claus and congratulate her on her award. Did you want to say a few words? Great. Look at that, a standing ovation.
Samir, thank you very much. I really didn't expect that. I like the work in the background. You know, to be compensated with the trophy, I don't know. I was going to hide out. I told my daughter, you go and accept it. Because I love to do that. I love children. I love people. And I have to tell you something. Homeless people live the whole year through on the streets. There are some people who are mentally sick, so we cannot judge anybody. We work with my sister's place, with the Namirind, with the Ark Mission, and etc., etc. But we work the whole year through. So, anyway, and I don't do it by myself. My daughter and I, we are a team. We work together, and we have lots of volunteers. So. I don't know if you know, English is my sixth language, and when I don't get enough sleep, I get nervous. My written English is better than my spoken English.
You're doing great.
So, thank you very much.
Well, and thank you again on behalf of City Council. Thanks so much.
And if you're really, really good to get to that.
Okay. Every mic's an open mic. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Take care. Merry Christmas. Okay. We've had disclosures of pecuniary interests. We've gone through formal and informal recognitions. Review of confidential matters to be considered in public. There are none. If I could have a motion, please, to go into closed session for the reasons outlined on the added agenda. Are there any additional ones that need to be read? Clerk Saunders.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's one additional reason as a result of yesterday's Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, a matter pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual with respect to employment-related matters and advice and recommendations of officers and employees of the corporation, including communications necessary for that purpose.
That's been moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Park. Any discussion? Okay, it'll be up on screen in a moment. We are voting.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
Okay, colleagues, we will move to Committee Room 3. For those attending, anyone watching from home, we'll be back in council chambers no later than 5:15. Difficult to predict when, but it won't be any later than 5:15. Thank you. Okay, it is 4:49 and dinner isn't until 6:30. So if we all behave ourselves, that's the last time I'll have banged that gavel. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, let's move on forward through the agenda. Confirmation and signing of the minutes of the previous meeting. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Park. Any discussion? Okay, that'll be up on screen in a moment. We'll call the question.
Councillor Van Holst. Closing the vote, but the motion carries 13-0.
Okay, we have a number of communications and petitions, 6.1 through to 6.8 on your added. We have a motion to refer each of those communications to the appropriate clause. Moved by Councillor Usher, second by Councillor Park. Any discussion? Let's call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Motions of which notice is given. There are none. We'll move to reports. First is 8.1, the 20th report of the Corporate Services Committee.
I will put the entire report on the floor. I will say we had a good discussion at committee about number 2.4, which is the advisory committee review. You'll see that there's a slight change from what was recommended by staff. That was coming forward in the committee recommendation. We're going to have a report from staff about some of the recommendations that came out of Diverse Voices for Change and some of the interim steps that have already been taken in terms of the advisory committee review no later than the end of February. And we're looking to extend the terms of the advisory committees a little bit, so we have more time to implement some of those changes around recruitment for the committees and have a 2-year term for the advisory committee appointments while we work through the overall review. The idea generally being, let's not rush what has been a long process that's not finished. Have a 2-year appointments for the advisory committees, make any changes we need to make partway through those terms, and then appoint people for the remainder of the term. So that's generally what we're recommending from committee. I will also point out on 2.1 for the CRM, phase 4 is complete on time, on budget. I know sometimes those things just go past by and not much discussion, but that's obviously good news. This is for phase 5. And on 2.2, which is the residential tax bylaw, this is to make sure we tax the affordable housing development at 356 Dundas at the residential rate rather than the multi-unit residential rate. As my colleagues know, that's much higher than it is for residential.
Okay, that's been moved by the chair. It'll be up on screen in a moment. Any speakers? We'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
And 8.2, 15th report of the Civic Works Committee.
Thank you. On behalf of Chair Ridley, I'm happy to bring forward the last report of Civic Works. She regrets she cannot be here, but she's doing her duty representing the City of London at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities at Advocacy Days. This was probably the least contentious of all meetings, having lasted all of 8 minutes. So with that, I'm happy to put it on the floor.
I think I saw the selfie on Twitter right after as well. Moved by Councillor Park. Any speakers? I would, if I could, speak just briefly from the chair to item 3, that's 2.2, the application by the City of London to rename a portion of 3rd Street from Oxford Street to Cheapside Street to Barron's Way Drive. Mitch Barron was an incredible Londoner and contributed a great deal to this community, both through his work with the medical facility that he ran, that he started, selling Bibles and Band-Aids to an international company that contributes a lot to our economy. But he's also was a philanthropist in our community and continues to be. And this is a great way for his family and for all of London to remember his contributions to this community. He has come to council chambers many times in the past. He's challenged council, he's challenged the community, and he always leads with both his heart and his mind. One of the things I'll remember about Mitch is that he felt that every single one of his employees deserved opportunities, and his goal was to ensure that he paid them a living wage, and his goal was that each employee family would be able to afford a home and a vehicle as well. And so he's certainly a missed member of our community, but this is a great way for us to remember him. Any other speakers? I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Thanks, Councillor Park. 17th report of Planning and Environment Committee.
Your Worship, our meeting didn't go 8 minutes. 8 hours? And it went 7 hours. And that involved two 2-hour-long public participation meetings, for which we'll pull those because there were split decisions from our committee. As well, it's notable to pull out or to point out the Heritage Districts 2.0, the kind of the roadmap for how we go forward and evaluate the next batch of heritage conservation districts within the city. As well, I think it's also worth noting, in public participation meetings, we discussed about a grand total of 2,270 residential units, 968 of those being on the rapid transit corridors. So with that, I will put forward the balance of the report with the exception of number 18, 19, and 20. Those refer to the committee agenda of 3.5, 3.6, and 3.7 at 3080 Bostwick Road. And 22, which refers to 230 North Center Road, or 3.9 in the committee agenda. I'm not sure if there's any others that any of the members wish to have pulled. 2.7.
Councillor Squires indicated he'd like to speak to 8 and 21, but not pull. Okay. Any others? Councillor Rusher?
Can we just pull 2.7?
It's being addressed.
Thank you.
No, sorry, it hasn't been pulled, but councillors have indicated they want to speak to it. Did you want to have a separate vote on 2.7?
Well, I'd like to ask a question then. So
Okay,
if that's
so
good
that
enough.
we'll deal with that separately then.
Yeah, okay.
Do you want to move the balance, Chair?
Your Worship, I will move the balance.
Okay, any speakers? Councillor Hummer.
So I'm just waiting. I know people said that they wanted to pull some things, but other times they just wanted to speak to things. So is it just 2.7 that's being pulled?
So what's been pulled at this point is 8, that's 2.7, 18, 3.5, 19, that's 3.6, 20, that's 3.7, and 22, that's 3.9.
Okay. So I just want to speak briefly to the Kellogg's holding provisions, the lifting of those provisions. Obviously, that's an important step forward. It's just a small step, but making sure that we have compatibility between the various different uses that have been proposed and have been approved through the zoning change that we dealt with a while ago is really important for the redevelopment of that site. It's a really important site for the whole city, obviously, and it's in Ward 4. I'm glad to see that it's moving ahead and that there weren't any issues in terms of those D6 guidelines. Hopefully they can move forward on the hotel and any other uses that they have contemplated for that site in short order. I wanted to speak also to 809 Dundas. There's zoning proposed there to allow for significantly tall 2 towers building with a big podium. I want to just comment on a number of things. There's obviously a lot of interest in building in Oldies Village, a lot of real estate interest both on the residential side and the Heritage District, but also on the south side of Dundas. We've seen all those buildings come up on King Street, 3 buildings built by Medallion. Here we have another developers who are looking to build 480 units in these 2 towers right by a future rapid transit station and by the Western Fair. Very positive development. I was glad to see that the community came forward to ask for things like affordable housing. We had some feedback from Lifespin and some other folks that they wanted to see, deep affordability, right? Affordable for people who are earning not very much money at all. And that's not what's being proposed here. We're talking about average market rent minus 5%, so 95% of average market rent. That certainly is helping, and it's going to save people who are going to live in these affordable units a lot of money over the long term that they're in their tenancies, but it's not the kind of deep affordability that some folks were hoping for in these units. So I think it's a step forward. I think when we're working through the inclusionary zoning bylaw, which is something we've already initiated the work on, we're going to be grappling with this issue, right? How many units are going to be affordable, what percentage? What kind of depth of affordability is there going to be? And we've just started to really implement it through bonusing for these portions of buildings. We had it with the one that's on Wellington near the rapid transit station. We have it for this one on Dundas near the rapid transit station. And in both those cases, it's 5% less than average market rent. And so I think it's a good step forward. It's not going as far as a lot of people would like. And there is still concern in the community that this is a pretty tall building to be having on Dundas. I think because it's stepped back with the podium, it's going to relate to the street very well. The design for what's happening on the commercial units is done very well. I think it's going to be very sensitive to the heritage character in that neighborhood. So I do support the rezoning. I want to thank the community members who have engaged in that process. It's been underway for quite a while, and people have certainly provided their feedback at different steps along the way, including the BIA and the Community Association.
Councillor Squire, this is on 3.8.
Just to build on what Councillor Helmer said through you, Mr. Mayor, there seems to be some confusion about what our plans are, what the city's plans are in terms of affordable housing, and I think that's reflecting itself in some disappointment in the number of affordable units and the depth of the reduction, as Councillor Helmer pointed out. And I think it would be helpful just to point out, if you could, through you, Mr. Fleming, what other directions we may be able to go to. So we have more affordable rents and a larger number of units and buildings, because I think there's an impression out there that this is what we're going to do all the time moving forward. And if we could clarify that, I think it would be helpful.
Well, Your Worship, I think there's a couple of perspectives at play here. One is the cost of providing affordable housing in this way to the development community, and that's provided by way of bonusing. So for each one of these units that are provided in this kind of bonusing scenario, it is a considerable cost to the developer. And we're thinking that we're getting into the over $1 million of cost to the developer providing affordable housing, in fact, probably up to $2 million of cost relating to affordable housing provided through 809 Dundas's bonusing. But the second perspective is there need to be a number of different layers of approaches to promoting the development of affordable housing in our community. And we will be coming forward with a report in the second quarter, scheduled of next year, which will come across as a strategy that identifies all of the different layers of tools that are available to the municipality for council to consider that will promote the development of affordable housing. And so bonusing is just one of those tools, and it does provide for a small amount of affordable housing, but it can be distributed throughout the city in many different developments. And there are these other tools that you'll see coming forward that will also promote even more affordable housing across the city.
Councillor Squire, I have you down for 2.7 as well, but that's been pulled, so I'll go to you first once we deal with that. Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question.
Councillor Park? Closing the vote and the motion carries 13-0.
Your worship, I think I'll put 2.7 on the floor.
Okay, I have two speakers, Chair. I have Councillor Squire and Councillor Usher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, through you. This is from my point of view, I know it's a receive and file matter, but in noting the correspondence received from the communities, both the London Development Institute and the London Home Builders Association, and a separate group, there appears to be a great deal of uncertainty around this particular issue. And I think I can understand that because all of a sudden a new screening map is being presented. And I'm not sure from reading the report what all the implications of that are going to be. How is it going to affect land that's already been purchased, that's going to be developed? So I wonder if staff can provide some guideline or roadmap as to where we're going next, because there is a great deal of uncertainty, it appears, in the community, the people who develop buildings, and I'm not sure it's been answered as of yet.
Worship, I'll start out, and then the city engineer might be able to augment this answer. But what this is illustrating, and we're trying to shine a light on, is there is new modeling that's prepared by the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority that is establishing potentially a new flood line. But it's early days, and this is just, as pointed out, new modeling that they're considering. There is a significant implication if, in fact, that flood line does become the new flood line, the new regulatory line, and that is the concern that all of us share, I think. So we're collaborating with the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. There will be a peer review that is being undertaken, and I think that the city engineer can speak further to that.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. We are in the process right now in Environmental and Engineering Services in acquiring a consultant who will peer review the model that was provided by Upper Thames. We have not seen the background assumptions or modeling that underlie this new tool. We don't know how it will be applied, and we do share many of the concerns from the development industry as it would impact infrastructure projects delivered by the city as well. So our intent is to work with Upper Thames, and they have been receptive to having that conversation to really understand the gist of the modeling, and once we are able to pare that down to really what the screening tool looks like, how they will apply it, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some clarity.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, and I understand that and I appreciate that. I wonder if there's an opportunity that you can set out right now, and I assume it won't be a problem, to consult with groups when you have more information, so that instead of having a situation where people are sort of not understanding or not fully up to speed, that they will understand exactly where the city is, the Upper Thames Conservation Authority is, and maybe even express their views about how it's affecting their industry.
Thank you, Your Worship. We actually are in the process of arranging those meetings now, and we would also encourage interested parties to liaise directly with Upper Thames as well to get that information firsthand. But we are setting up meetings with the development industry. I believe we have one actually tomorrow or very shortly this week, and we'll keep them engaged in our process.
Any other speakers? Councillors, Usher and Zafman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate the answer that staff is giving. But I wonder if, I'm not so sure that this answer means that we have any authority over this. A lot of people out there sending me emails saying that they don't quite understand it, it affects their land and so on. And they want to be involved with this process. It's not just the industry, but the individuals who own the property. And I'm wondering if by just receiving this report, if it gives Taft any punch to go back and negotiate with, or if there's even room to negotiate with the Conservation Authority. Because a lot of people are concerned about this, that this will affect their land. So, can I get an answer for that, Mr. Chair, through you?
Well, through his worship, that's one of the things we're exploring right now. We're trying to understand what it actually means in terms of regulation and whether it applies to the Section 28 permits that are received by Upper Thames, but we are actually working that internally with our legal counsel to determine that.
So what I'd like to ask then is that, does this give staff the authority to thoroughly analyze the situation and force the Conservation Authority to ensure that the people are involved, to have their say and so on? I want to be sure that when we receive this, that we're not just receive it and say, okay, go and do your stuff. I want to give staff the authority to put a little oomph into this towards the Conservation Authority, to force them, to let them realize that a lot of people are affected. It's not just a matter of writing a procedure like this, but people are affected. Can you tell me what kind of, I use the word power, you have to negotiate this?
Through your worship, the Upper Thames has a regulatory authority solely. It's not a city regulation that we're invoking here. This is the Upper Thames through their act and legislation. So in terms of oomph or power, or we are working with them. We have a meeting set up with them tomorrow. We're trying to work through this. The industry is also aware. Clearly, they're providing information. We are working with them as well. They do have an upcoming meeting, and we will be attending that, as will the industry, and expressing concerns.
So, Mr. Chair, a lot of people are asking, what does it mean, screening area map? Are we familiar with that, we as a city? Or is this part of our negotiation and trying to understand it? We are going to try to get from there. Because nobody seems to understand what that means.
So this is through the worship. That's exactly the issues. We're trying to understand what screening actually means, whether it's actually regulatory authority or whether it's just an area. Right now, we are considering as an area of caution or an area of further investigation, but we're not sure if it's actually part of their actual regulatory authority or the regulatory line still exists where the previous flood line is. So that is the gray area that we're working in right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Mayor Hubert, Councillor Zafman, Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Helmer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel like maybe I'm repeating it, but I think what we're all saying is something very similar, and no one really knows the answer to the question. It seems quite arbitrary. We're not sure what the criteria is. We're not sure what the assumptions are. So, Mr. Mayor, through you to staff, I guess my concern here is that it seems that as a partner, there should have been consultation both with our staff, development services and engineering staff, as well as with the industry before this item ever got to the floor of council. Then these questions wouldn't necessarily have played forward. And I know, certainly in my years on council, I've watched the modeling change. Mud Creek, has been one where the model has changed a number of times. So we need not just the modeling, but we also need solutions, because it's not necessarily a barrier to development. It really defines how the development will happen. So those are concerning things. Certainly, we're this long, maybe 10 years after we started SWAP. We started SWAP around 2008 or 2000, in that neighborhood. And so I would have expected by now we would have had some of those assumptions flushed out. So cautionary note here, certainly from how Upper Thames engages with both the city and the industry.
Okay, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to be clear that the UTRCA is still working through this, so they haven't concluded anything here, and I just don't want it to be perceived that they've come to the end of a process. They're working through that process, and there's still time for that engagement to occur, so I think it's important to point that out.
I appreciate the clarification. I'm not assuming otherwise, but I think the problem is, what do they say about assumptions, right? So I think there's assumptions on both sides, and the greater clarity we can bring to those, and the greater evidence that we can bring to those, then the opportunities for misunderstanding get minimized.
Okay, great. Let's move then to Councillor Zay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad to hear, I think, the two of the pieces that were of concern around discussion with the industry that'll be taking place, which is great to hear, as well as the fact that this will be peer reviewed by the city through a consultant, which is also good to hear. One thing though, which I think hasn't really been addressed, and I might just, this is from the staff report, I'm just going to quote it here. It cites that in the interim, the city intends to use the screening area for planning and development applications and building permit applications as the engineering study continues. The city anticipates that the UTRCA will request applicants obtain confirmation and approval from the UTRCA before any city approval of a planning, development, or building application within this screening area of London. So that's interim use, and I'm curious how we're going to be doing that if we don't know exactly what it is just yet.
Mr. Yeoman.
Through the chair, so the screening area is essentially a tool for a conversation. As the gentleman have mentioned, in the end, the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority does issue Section 28 permits. From their perspective, the text of the regulation is what's more important than the actual mapping. So they're interpreting the screening area to be related to the text of that regulation. As the gentleman mentioned as well, we're working to clarify that as we go forward. They'll be intimately involved in our pre-application consultations as always, and we'll be working through the issues at that time.
Through the mayor, thank you for that. I think I can fully understand why someone who has an interest in this area would be concerned with language like that. So if that's not going to be the case, that it's not going to be applied as such, I think that's not a problem. And I know we're not passing anything tonight to that notion, but I just want clarity that that screening area is not going to be the determining factor for applications going forward. Could someone from staff just speak to that?
Your Worship, the screening area is not an applicable law. So in terms of issuing permits, the chief building official will not use that as the basis for issuing permits. Our feeling was that if we were aware that the Conservation Authority had an interest in lands beyond, for example, the regulatory limit, that we should inform applicants that the conservation had that interest so that we wouldn't get farther down the road and find that there was a change to the regulation that prevented some land from being developed that at the beginning of the process we all thought could be developed. So really what we're trying to do is ensure that people who are affected by these changes will have the appropriate information and that they can make inquiries of the Conservation Authority as well as the ones that we will be making to determine whether or not these changes will have an impact on people's rights in the future.
And Councillor Hopkins and then Helmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just want to remind my colleagues here that we are receiving this for information. I sit on the Dingman Environmental Assessment Stakeholders Group, and I know we'll be meeting in a couple weeks. The Dingman EA process is going through a public consultation process, and I hear the concerns from my colleagues here, and maybe those concerns can be forwarded to the stakeholders meeting for part of that public consultation. So it's just a suggestion to my colleagues to forward that out. I'm not sure what the date of the meeting will be, but I know it's in the next couple weeks, so I'll leave that with you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Helmer.
I just want to say we didn't have too much discussion about this at Planning Committee, and I'm certainly glad that folks sent in their correspondence that they did, you know, wondering what's going on and having their questions. I think it's really helpful that our staff brought forward this report so that this conversation could happen. This obviously going to the Upper Thames board later this month, and I think it's helpful that it came to our committee and then we were having a discussion here at council. I know that landowners who might want to develop on the properties, you know, obviously they're concerned about where the development limits are going to be. I would say that, of course, the risk to any future buildings and the risk to the lands is, of course, from the natural hazards, right? So this is why we do floodplain mapping. We want to avoid building buildings where they're going to be flooded, where there'll be risk to people and there'll be risk to property. We're seeing more and more flooding You know, the last time I was at FCM, sat in a presentation from the insurance industry talking about the just massive destruction of property and losses that are happening all over the world. You know, it's just exponential increase in damage. And we have to be really careful about these things. This is why we have conservation authorities who do this work. I know that there's going to be differences of opinion about where the flood line should be. We've had applications come before us where people really, really desperately wanted to build a tall apartment building in an area that the Upper Thames said, you know, that's actually in the flood fringe, you can't build there, that's not appropriate. So, you know, I think we have to be really careful about this. We need to make sure we're trying to minimize those risks and avoid them where they can be avoided. I understand people are going to have strong opinions on that, but I think this is the appropriate way of doing it, which is have public report say, hey, this is what we're thinking in terms of the screening area, and then have more discussions, all the people who are interested in that issue, so we can come to a good floodplain. I think that's what we're trying to get to in the end, right?
Thank you. Any other speakers? Yep, want to wrap up, Chair? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to my colleagues for good questions, good discussion. I think as identified, this is a very much a for receipt and to be circulated for further discussion. That's very important. I'd caution, I heard the word that this was arbitrary. I'd be caution on that because the mapping and the techniques involved in mapping and modeling for flood forecasting is far from arbitrary. It's very much modeled and scientific. But there is a question of how these mappings I guess relate to the text, and in the report it notices that where there's a discrepancy between the modeling and the mapping or the text prevails. So for right now, the text is there. It allows us that to be the regime under which applications are processed and considered, but certainly, as Councillor Helmer noted, we want to be diligent and vigilant about where flooding may occur within the city. And we do not want to increase life safety risks associated with building in flood areas. So it's good that Upper Thames is bringing these things forward, that they're revising and reviewing their modeling forecasts and functions so that we can make informed decisions and we can make informed planning policy so that we can decrease insurance claims, decrease our servicing costs associated with damage associated with flooding, and help protect lives. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to say to wrap up.
Okay, so we've got a recommendation from committee to receive the report. Are there any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. Voting.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 13-0.
Chair, is that the report, or are there a couple other matters that we need to discuss?
It'd be nice and easy if that was it. But we're not going to take ourselves to dinner unless we have these items, and these might fill in that time. At committee, items 3.5, 3.6, and 3.7 are noted on the agenda here as 19, 19, and 20 with respect to 3080 Bostwick consumed about 2 hours of discussion. There was actually surprisingly little discussion during the public participation meeting sections. The 2 hours of discussion was between the applicant, staff, and our committee. I'm challenged to figure out procedurally how to bring this forward. Our committee was deadlocked on 2 separate motions, 3-3 on both of those. One was an application to a motion to refer this back to staff for further work, and the second was a motion to approve the plans with an amended bylaw sheet and zoning to go with that. Some of the issues associated with this, the parcels at 3080 are zoned for high-density residential. Some of the challenges in the discussion, and I'm probably going to want to wrap up afterwards, but I just want to set the context for it, were some questions about whether there was an eligibility for bonusing in this circumstance, as it sits outside of the urban growth, or sorry, not the urban growth boundary, the primary transit area and the built area boundary. and how this reflects to our policies vis-a-vis the Southwest Area Plan as well, and our London Plan and official plan. But beyond just the bonusing conditions, there were a few deficiencies and questions that you'll see in the staff report that had to do specifically around responses to the environmental impact study and some drainage and interactions with the drain associated there. Also with the design and with the question of how density was mixed on that property and that site, within the sites there. So I understand there's been some discussion with the applicant in the week intervening between committee and now. I think if I might, Your Worship, if I could ask staff to kind of go through where we sit now and if there's any updates that they might be able to give us.
I was actually going to suggest that as well, so we're on the same page. I wonder, Mr. Kosovitz, Mr. Yeoman, thank you for attending tonight.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. So I just want to start by stating that when staff brought forward the recommendation for refusal, we are supportive of the high-intensity development that is located at this site. The Southwest Area Secondary Plan plans for that. The 89 official plan does. The London plan does as well for the high-density overlay. The issue we had is the additional bonusing that was proposed, the additional density beyond the available permissions. We thought that the permissions that were in place with the policy framework that was in play and in force actually is going to provide enough growth opportunity for the area and really create that vibrant and diverse community that York is really looking for. The councillor did articulate some of our technical concerns as well. The key piece as well was one of our determining factors was the lack of the mix of housing forms on the site as well, which I think is an important point to note. We haven't changed our recommendation that's before you. What we have been doing is working with the applicant to clarify the alternative planning analysis that they provided to committee. There are draft official plan amendments and zoning bylaws that are associated with that if council would like to consider that, and I'm happy to answer any technical questions related to those.
I have Councillor Park on the speaker's list, but you've got the floor if you want.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is a procedural one. Since we don't have a recommendation, by procedure by law, I believe we have to have a motion on the floor in order to enter into debate. I would, in that circumstance, would put forward the motion that I put forward at Planning Committee and allow that to be the part for debate. But I'm not sure if it's the chair to put forward a split decision.
Because we have a Okay, just for clarity, you're putting forward a motion to refer sites 1, 3, and 5? Okay, because you voted for that motion at committee, you can bring that forward as chair at council. Okay, so I'd look for it. Go ahead. Okay, so it's been moved referral by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Hawkins.
And if I might, just to explain the rationale for the
Sure.
referral. The rationale for the referral, I recognize, and certainly through the course of committee and subsequently in the media, that there seems to be an appetite to move forward, and we can recognize and understand that. But there are some fairly large deficiencies in the application. It does seem rushed to have been brought forward to the committee at this point. It does not have some of the key components that would be required for us to be able to hear and pass a zoning amendment in order to do that. Specifically, things like the environmental responses and how those I guess, stormwater management and the drain, how those interact. Those key pieces would normally have been resolved and have a recommendation for us as addressed as resolved as it came forward from staff. Those have not yet been done yet. So a referral back, I think, would be really important, especially on parcel 3. I think that's the one I believe it's 3. Yeah, thank you. If there's not an appetite from the committee to refer it all back, that 3 is a very important one to refer back to have those technical details worked out. They're not normally addressed with holding provisions in any of the other applications that we would do. So at this time, I think it's most appropriate to refer back. We may not, I think, from what I understood from the committee discussion, there may be the appetite from council to provide that bonusing permissions. that might be a separate issue altogether. That seemed to be the source of impasse between the applicant and staff. And I think council could be able to resolve that, but some of the other issues do need to be resolved in further negotiation and discussion between staff and the applicant.
Okay, so to the mover and the seconder of the motion, based on the comments of the mover, I'm inclined to call 19.3.6 separately, that's site 3. So we'll deal with, at time of voting, we can enter into debate on all 3 sites during the discussions, but I'll be calling 18 and 20, 3.5 and 3.7, sites 1 and 5 together, and 3 separately. Okay, I have Councillor Park and Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you. At committee, I voted against the referral. I talked about how I don't believe that this has been rushed. This has been a long conversation, over 18 months of conversation with the proponent and staff. And so what I have prepared for this evening is a motion that addresses a lot of the concerns of the committee that we're talking about, issues of urban design and those pieces. So should the referral fail, I do certainly have a motion to bring forward after that.
Okay, and Councillor and to all of council, I was anticipating some significant debate, and so there are bylaws available for 1, 3, and 5 tonight. I asked for that at my pre-meeting, and if there's a referral, then those will be held in abeyance, and or any other such factors. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion here on the referral. I'm only going to allow members to speak once, and are there any other speakers on the referral? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I second this at planning, and I am supportive of the referral back for further information. And this is not about refusing the application here. It's about making sure we understand that what we are approving here tonight. It's about getting further information on what this development will mean for this area when it comes to environmental concerns, stormwater management. Congestion in this area this development will have a huge impact, and we have to understand what we are doing here when it comes to moving around this area, as well as having an understanding of a comprehensive plan, more about what is happening not only on these 3 sites, but the rest of the development that's going to be moving forward. I've heard from a number of residents in Ward 9 and 10 that what will this mean for residents as they move around? Why are we not fixing the problem of congestion before we approve? There are a few areas in SWAP that allow for high density. This area allows for high density. That is not the concern. The developer is very committed to the community. I have no doubt that the developer, with the applications that have already come about in this area, the work and his commitment. I think the bonusing that we talked a bit about planning can be further discussed with staff and the developer, and I would encourage that. Referring it back will not stop development. It will not stop the need for housing units to be built to relieve the stress on the rental market. It will not stop driving up prices and making life unaffordable. It will not stop the need for density in the area and allow for different kinds of housing. As a Ward 9 councillor, the challenges of how we balance growth and how that relates to the London plan is a constant challenge for me. Referring it back is about getting further information on as it relates to the environmental impacts and the congestion. And regardless if you support the referral back or the new motion that will be presented to us tonight, I would ask, or I would add a friendly amendment to both the referral and the motion, and that is to review the timing of the future roadworks in this area. And if you read the recommendation, you will see a list of roadworks. The timelines, especially on Southdale, being 2026 and 2031, I would like that amendment to have at least that we review the roadworks when we refer or approve the motion coming forward with these 3 sites. Thank you.
Okay, and that's seen as a friendly amendment by the mover of the referral. I have Deputy Mayor Hubert. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my colleague raised a number of concerns. Sorry, Mrs. Claus's candy cane has just wreaked havoc on my throat. Has raised a number of very salient points, but I guess I'm finding myself, Mr. Mayor, kind of caught in midair, because I don't really know what Councillor Park's amendment or motion may present, and whether it's the product of, and maybe the product of the conversations that have happened in the last week that would give this council and the community adequate comfort with respect to the concerns, and yet send a clear sign and a clear signal as to where we're going. I think I would absolutely agree with Councillor Hopkins in terms of how do we bring forward some of the road works that need to happen, some of that infrastructure that needs to be in place. I know we go into our GMIS work and our development studies in the next year, and that will be significant in terms of how we look at that and whether something needs to be brought forward or something needs to be pushed back, and juggling that. Actually making a decision on this with the appropriate holding provisions would give some signals to that study, and then that could be contemplated as part of some of that work. So that's where I leave it, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure how to answer that question. So through you, perhaps to my colleague, if I may, if her motion contemplates some of the discussions that have happened, because that's really what is in the report, is to continue talking and find resolution, then I won't support the referral. I'd rather this council make a decision and then allow the work to continue to progress in an orderly manner.
Fair enough. I think that the Deputy Mayor has asked for a little bit of insight into the motion that you're bringing forward. Councillor Park, if you'd be willing to share that.
Sure, thank you. When dealing with a referral, you never know how far to dive into the actual debate. So the motion that I have prepared deals with a lot of serious holding provisions that address the concerns, in particular on Site 3. So I'm happy to read them verbatim. It'll take me a while, but a public site plan is one of those, talking about the issues on Site 3 in particular, the urban design pieces, dealing with the roadways and all those sorts of things.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Helmer.
I did support the idea of a referral at committee, and I still think that is probably the best way forward. In particular for Site 3, I think that the issue around how far should we be back from the drain, I think that needs to be sorted out, and I think it can be. Sorted out. I recognize, and I think it was clear at the meeting, staff and the applicant both said, we've tried to work it out and we're kind of at an impasse, and here we are at committee. And so I think that it's still possible, although it seems like we haven't reached a resolution yet, that some of these issues can be resolved. For example, the urban design issues that have been raised, how things are relating into the parkland. And I think some ground has been covered by the sounds of it. I think there's been some discussion that's been fruitful. So I still would support the idea of a referral. I'm not necessarily opposed to what Councillor Park is suggesting. It depends exactly what it is. I'd like to see the language. But I do think, these lands are zoned for high density residential. The question is, how high density? We have had in some other areas of the city some higher density in terms of units per hectare developments outside the built area boundary, approved by this council before we actually had passed some other policy. I know why our staff are recommending a refusal, because it's just too much based on the policy framework that we've got in place. And so they're looking at the policy framework and they say that's too high. And we want to keep it. The difference is something like 400 units, between what would be allowed with the zoning that's been asked for by the applicant and what would be allowed with the maximum of 150 units per hectare, and no bonusing. But I think we have to keep in mind those other changes that we've made, because we made changes to swap and the minimum maximum residential densities along that whole enterprise corridor. And I talked about that at the planning meeting. I said that was thousands of units potentially that we just took off the table, right? They're not going to be able to be built in that area anymore. And this is the area that's for high density residential. And in the overall area, it's one of the few areas, as Councillor Hopkins has pointed out. So I think we really need to get this one right. It seems to me like a referral is the right way to make sure we make a good decision on that. I do think that there's merit in having high density buildings there. I think what the applicant is proposing in around this community center, which is a great new community facility, makes a lot of sense. Having people living very close to the community facility like that is great. You know, I think having the park there is a really nice addition as well. And the overall residential area is going to be mixed, right? This part, because we're just looking at this part, kind of telescoping in on it, it's obviously all high density residential, but that's how it was intended in the plan, right? The overall plan for this area was high density. So I'm interested to see what my colleagues think about the referral. If it doesn't go through, see what the debate says about the actual approvals.
Councillor Slee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't support the referral. I think we have to recognize that there's reality versus some of the policies and plans that we have in this community. You know, I heard my councillor colleague, Councillor Hopkins, talk about this won't stop development. And she's right, I don't think it's going to stop development. But I think what will happen is development will be delayed in the city. And what that means for me and what that means for Londoners, I think, is more costs. Because if there's not enough units in our city, there's going to be more costs for the everyday Londoner who's looking to move into a new place, who's looking to start a new home. Myself as a millennial, I hear this quite often from many of my friends and colleagues where they don't find enough places to call home. And we need to get out of the way. I've seen recently in the past, I think 5 to 10 years in Milton and Peel region, the impacts we've seen when government has sometimes created tensions or created sometimes what you want to call it red tape, and has only led to more costs and higher costs in our community, in their communities. So I think we need to do a lot better at moving forward and ensuring that we can have more units within our community. I think when I saw the report from Elstar, and I think it was reported, 906 homes were sold in October, the highest number since they've been tracking since 1978. And I know many of us were knocking doors, and as I was knocking doors, I met many new people who are from the GTAH, who've moved to London, who've decided to call London home because they said life isn't affordable over there, and London has a lot of opportunities for us, and this is where we want to plant our seeds. I want those people to continue to come here. I don't want us to be a roadblock. I don't want us to be a barrier. And I get that this might be a referral to clean up some of the questions that we might have. I think we could do that. I think Deputy Mayor Hubert alluded to that when he talked about the provisions and the holding provisions, and that might be an opportunity for us to do that. I think we need to do that. This is the last opportunity for this council. This is going to be our last decision to say to the development world and to say to the developers in this city that we'll work with you. We understand that there might be these 1 or 2 odd cases that happen like this, but we need to move forward because at the end of the day, there's Londoners waiting to look for more homes, and I don't want to stand in the way of those people trying to find new homes, and I don't think it's fair for them to have to pay more because we know, and we've seen it here locally, there have been bidding wars now. We might have not seen this 10 years ago, but we're seeing that here now today, and I think we need to do our part to help with the market. So I hope we defeat the referral and have the question come before, and I look forward to supporting Councillor Park's motion.
Councillor Asher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've always heard and anticipate that this area would be like a Cherry Hill. And I know that I keep repeating that, but I have to repeat it because when we broke ground, when we bought the land, that's what we heard, at least that's what I heard. And I've always anticipated apartment buildings and office buildings around this community center. So from my perspective, it's a village waiting to happen. I can't support the referral because I think we need to go on with this. And I think that if this council drops this and refer it, I don't think that it's going to come back to this council in the near future. When I say in the near future, I'm talking 2, 3, 4 months. This project has to go on from my perspective. We've got to create jobs out there. If we delay this, we're going to delay jobs. And I believe that the holding provision will help clear up anything to do with environment or stormwater or whatever it is. I've heard a lot of different people talk about this development over the past week. And when I say a lot, I'm not the ward councillor. I do respect the ward councillor, and she gets a different message from what I'm getting, because I'm getting message from people all over. Some of them are my constituents, some of them are her constituents, some of them are constituent from another area. But they're talking about this development. And many of them see the community center sitting out there all by itself, and they want to see something happening around it. all of us have heard developers talking that we're moving too slow. Over the years, we've tried to move things faster. In fact, I would venture to say that we probably move this kind of approval in about half the time that we used to do 20 years ago. I may be speaking a little bit out of whack here, but I'm sure that it's much, much faster. We can't continue delaying this. And I think that now is the time to approve this and put some holding provision on it so that that holding provision, they could work on it, because it seems to me that what we need is some additional communication between staff and the developer. And I do believe the holding provision will do that. So I'm not supporting the referral at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Chamber of Commerce put on the Economic Outlook event this morning, and I asked the speaker what the big opportunities were for London. Housing was one of those, and that's something we really need to jump on. So I'm, like my colleagues, concerned that we move forward. I would like, through you, to ask staff if this was referred, how long do they think this would take to come back to council for approval?
Through the chair, it probably would be several months. There are a number of elements related to the environmental impact statement and also to the hydrogeological assessment that was conducted that Upper Thames has concerns with. Even with a holding provision, you're still looking at a considerable amount of time to address those matters as well, so the effect is pretty well the same.
So the effect would be the same either way. So, okay, that's a very interesting statement. We could either move forward or refer it and get a similar timeline. A procedural question: are we able to simply table this referral and then look in detail at Councillor Park's motion?
We can't table the motion. We can get you some more detail about the motion coming forward from Councillor Park. But I think what you heard from Mr. Yeoman is that this is going to take some time. It's going to take several months, whether this is referred back, or it will take several months to deal with the holding provisions. I guess the unknown factor of that is, as other councillors have indicated, it will be a different governance body making the decision at that time. And so it may not proceed at that time.
Okay. Thank you. I would then, if I can, request through you to Councillor Park for some additional detail. Seems to think that the holding provisions could deal with those. I might like to hear those.
Yeah, it is a bit of a procedural issue for sure. Someone could have brought forward a referral, and we would debate the referral. Someone could have brought forward the main motion. We could have considered that in greater detail. And so I'm going to allow it because some people are being asked to vote without all of the information available to them. And so, Councillor Park, if you'd like to address that, I also know that Mr. Yeoman's prepared to provide information as well if you choose.
Sure, why not break the mold at the last meeting? Why not? So on site one, to deal with the bonusing, so there are indeed trade-offs for this level of intensification, talking about a high-quality development which is generally in accordance with the site plan and elevations as attached to Schedule 1, Schedule 2 pending bylaw, which we'll see later. The base, talking about a ground floor design that includes large proportions of clear glazing as a variety of materials with direct enhancements to commercial space from Southdale Road. B, a ground floor ceiling height that is greater than the height of all other individual stories to activate the street and create a vibrant pedestrian realm. C, the provision of a portion of the top of the podium as a greened outdoor amenity for residents and 2 levels of underground parking. The middle portion, a slim tower architectural design to minimize the overall mass, visual impact, and sunlight disruption of the tower. B, towers that utilize a high proportion of vision glass as the primary form of cladding on the tower to mitigate the overall visual building mass and provide a light and refined appearance. C, a setback of the tower portions of the building from Southdale to Bostwick above the 5th story. D, utilize changes in color and materials to visually break up the massing of the tower. The top, utilize building setbacks and variation in massing to define the building cap and completely conceal the mechanical and elevator penthouse within the overall architectural design. Contribution of $25,000 toward the creation of a skate park on the community center lands. Provision of 20% accessible apartment units. large caliper boulevard tree planting with minimum 100 millimeter caliper and a minimum distance of 10 meters between tree plantings for the extent. I could go on, but I think that's okay for site 1. Site 3, the holding provisions associated with that will deal with the hydrogeological aspects of that with the H5, H213, H underscore asterisk, lots of those. And then on to site 5, talking about trade-offs in terms of bonusing, ground floor design, large proportions of clear glazing, ground floor to ceiling height, ceiling greater than the height of all others, very similar to the other one. I don't want to bore anybody, but that's to the level of degree that the motion will be.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those answers, and because I do, I think I'll vote against the referral. There's no time like the present, so maybe we should move forward in the present. Thank you, Councillor Park.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So first of all, I have a question through you to staff, through you to Mr. Yeoman. You had said earlier that the delay would be several months, whether it was a holding provision or whether it was a referral. But my question is, if we went with a holding provision rather than referral, could there not be some aspects of the project that would move forward? Could the applicant not proceed in some manner versus the referral back, which would delay the entire project?
Through the chair, so the applicant could continue to proceed with site plan approval. The ability of having the zoning actually in place with a holding provision means that the underlying zoning permissions are all in force, and so it's just that the outstanding matters still need to be resolved. The effect of the referral is essentially that everything is referred back to consider it comprehensively and then to return to you with a package that addresses all the outstanding matters.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. So I didn't support the referral at committee, and I won't support it tonight either. I think Councillor Park's motion will satisfy all of the concerns that are there. I'm also confident that that staff will deal with the issues around the roads and the traffic congestion and those other issues as this project proceeds. I don't, after having some discussions, I've heard that it's not something that will happen in reaction to this development. It would be in a way that's sort of concurrent. So I'm satisfied with those issues as well. This is, as we've heard, this multi-million-dollar community center that's been built right in what would be the heart of a new community. And right now it's sitting there on its own. We talk about being outside of the primary transit area. There's transit service to this area. And as we move forward, as this community is developed and as it grows, there's no doubt that the Transit Commission will grow and serve this area as well as they do other areas in the city. I was with Councillor Van Holst at this economic update this morning, and one thing we heard this morning was that London is the hottest real estate market in the country right now. The real estate market has cooled substantially in places like Vancouver and Toronto because of policy legislation that has been put into place for that very reason, to cool the market somewhat. And one of the reasons we're seeing London so hot is because investors are coming to London instead of Toronto, because the opportunities have sort of been curtailed there in Toronto. But another reason that the real estate market is so hot in London is because of the lack of supply. So I agree with Councillor Salih and the comments that he's made about increasing the supply in London to meet the demand, and perhaps our market could come down a bit because it is quite hot right now. I'm satisfied that having the holding provisions in place that Councillor Park is proposing to have in her motion will deal with the issues that were described by staff. Staff talk about this being a high-density location and a perfect place for high-density location. The question was how high the density should be, and I think that's because they have to deal with this application based on the policies that are before them right now. And so I think as a council, that's our prerogative to say that these are our policies. And we can go forward with a development like this, and we can direct staff to go forward with a development of this type. So I will support Councillor Park's motion if the referral is defeated.
Councillor Squire.
Mr. Chair, I won't be supporting a referral. I'll be supporting moving forward this. It's really comforting to me after being here for 4 years to hear Councillor Salee actually sounding a little bit like me. It's, I thought I don't know, he was channeling his inner Phil Squire there for a few minutes. I think we have to move ahead, and I'm comfortable doing that. So I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Salee said, and I'll sit down.
Thank you, Councillor Salee. Okay, any other speakers? Okay, there are none. Let's call the question then on the referral, parts 1 and 5, right after the chair has one more opportunity to change our minds. Go ahead.
Well, it was funny during the campaign. Somebody said, "What's the most important issue for you?" And how are you going to? You're only one vote of 15. How are you going to convince people to take that point of view? I said, "Well, I'm an excellent debater, but it looks like." And then the next day I got a report that showed that I was one of the most dissenting voices on council, and rarely got people to go my way. So, nonetheless, I'm going to give it one more kick at the can here. This is not a question of build or don't build. I think we've heard really loud and clear. This is clearly an identified area for high-density development. It's not a question of now or later. You just heard from Mr. Yeoman. It's pretty clearly going to be fairly equal in the amount of time that it takes, whether we refer back or we adopt the motion that Councillor Park has prepared. But what it does do is it shows that we're ready to just walk away from some fairly significant planning principles that we have at a moment's notice. And I wouldn't say this is much dissimilar from the enterprise corridor in the Southwest Area Plan. There was some pretty significant advice from staff that said, don't do that. And then council did that. And then we've spent the last 6 years trying to clean that up. So when you see 3 refusal recommendations in a row on one project, it should give council pause. Say, hold on 1 second. What's underneath that? And we had that discussion at committee, and one of the main things was the question of density. Is this an appropriate place for allowing bonusing? Well, fair enough. That could be a discussion that council can have and say, you know what? It's right on the edge of the primary transit area. It's not too far away from the built area boundary. That might be appropriate for us to say, okay, in this place. But what is concerning to me is there are some fairly significant deficiencies in the application. And for us to say, yep, you know, let's walk away from that right now. We can cover it with holding provisions. I don't think that's appropriate because that's not the way we'd handle any other application. And I'm hesitant to say this because I know the applicant is bringing this forward in good faith. But this advantages one applicant. If we were not to do this in other similar circumstances, this applicant has a fairly significant advantage in this market. In the same way that happened in the enterprise corridor with the same applicant. So I'm concerned. I have a lot of concern about that, and say, okay, I think somebody said, yeah, we need to say we will work with you. I agree. That's why a referral and not adopting the refusal. That's a big difference. Referral versus refusal. Refusal sends it all back to the drawing board. Let's start all together from pre-consultation straight on the way through. Referral says, let's address some of these fairly significant deficiencies, specifically those environmental questions and responses to the technical reports. Those are big things. We wouldn't do this normally with any other application. But unfortunately, every once in a while, we get stars in our eyes about large applications and say, this is going to be the biggest one of this, and this is going to be fairly significant over here. And so we're ready to set aside significant amounts of pre-planning that we did in terms of our policy documents. This isn't red tape. This is how we make sure that we have an equal market and that we address fairly significant concerns about how our building interfaces with our built environment, how it interfaces with our natural environment, how it interfaces with our social environment. So these aren't irreconcilable differences. The impasse that we heard was from staff about, because it was outside of our policy, we need as a council to give leave to that bonusing policy and that density policy. Fair enough, we can do that. We shouldn't, as a council, give leave to our environmental policies. We've got to be very careful about that. So that's why I think it's really appropriate to make the referral here. As I said, time is the same. The number of units that gets built going to be the same. It's a question of process and advantaging or not advantaging or treating everything somewhat equally. So I think it's really important, just on a question of principle, just do the referral. Allow it to have another day. Allow those differences to be reconciled, and allow it to come back for approval in normal course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have no additional speakers. So I'm going to call Site 3 first, and that is 3.6, item 19. It's been moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. On the referral. We'll call the question. Okay, we're voting on the referral, Site 3. Oh, I see Site 1 in the motion. Scroll down. Gotcha. So this is, just to be clear, this is for Site 3 only. And we're voting. Councillor Salee.
Closing the vote and the motion carries, loses 49.
It's a pretty important distinction, Clerk Saunders. Yeah, that was pretty amazing, Councillor Turner. And on the referral for Sites 1 and 5, moved by Councillor Turner and seconded by Councillor Hopkins.
Closing the vote and the motion loses 4-9.
Okay, so I anticipate Councillor Park has a motion to bring forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Park.
I'm happy to bring all three motions forward regarding sites 1, 3, and 5. It may take my colleagues a few moments to read through it once it's on the screen, and then we can crack up the debate.
Okay, does the motion have a seconder? Mayor seconding the motion. Mayor would like to speak to the motion. Councillor?
Do we have paper copies of this? Okay.
They're coming around, Councillor. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Hubert. This was a tough discussion of planning. It was bound to be a tough discussion at council as well. And there were a lot of nuances here that I think that were considered. We have policies, and we have policies for very important reasons. But we don't write the policies and then go home for 4 years. We work hard every week to exercise our best judgment, to interpret those policies, to interpret the intent of those policies and previous decisions of council, and to make the right decision for London. And all of the concerns that were raised by those supporting the referral, I think, are very valid reasons. And I think that we need to take that into account. And I think that Councillor Park has taken that into account with the holding provisions that are presented to us for sites 1, 3, and 5. This is a unique situation. These do occur from time to time. Yes, this site is outside of the built area boundary. It's across the street from the built area boundary. And yes, this site is outside of the primary transit area. It's just down the street from that area. And that's going to influence staff recommendations. They're fulfilling the policies that we endorsed. But what else did we do? We built a $60 million recreation facility right in the center of this site, with this, to Councillor Usher's point, with the intent of building a community around it. We built that site out of the built area boundary. We built that site out of the primary transit area. And I think that, certainly I recall, each time I supported this moving forward, we also envisioned significant development around that area. And so what these holding provisions do, I believe, and I understand that staff and the applicant have worked extremely hard towards working on these between the planning committee meeting and this council meeting, is they address the concerns that have been raised, the potential concerns that have been raised. This will allow the process to continue, and it will allow us to see our vision for this area come to fruition with the appropriate checks and balances in place. And so I will be supporting this motion. I know that each and every committee member at the planning committee spoke in favor of this growth, in favor of development in principle, spoke about potentially endorsing a referral just to be extra safe or just to follow the policy that's in place. But I think that there are particular situations where we need to exercise our judgment as a council, and I think that this allows us to exercise our judgment in a responsible way. So thank you to Councillor Park for bringing this forward tonight, and thank you everyone for or against this for their comments tonight as well.
Thank you. I'll look for any other speakers. Councillor Hopkins, to the motion on the floor.
Yes, I will be speaking to the motion on the floor, and I would like to add or tag on a friendly amendment to the motion, given the concerns that I've heard in the community about the roadworks that need to be at least moved forward and to have staff review it. So I wonder if the mover of the motion would be okay with that?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd look to staff to give me the definitions of those holding provisions that we put in there, because I do know that we talked about that, but in terms of what those provisions.
So thank you, councillors. Mr. Kotsifas, you've heard the friendly amendment that was brought forward by Councillor Hopkins. You're familiar with the bylaws that have been prepared for consideration. Do they align, or does it need this additional language? And I think I would suggest to the mover of the motion, maybe to be safe, we include that language as well.
Through your worship, the holding provisions that were included in the bylaw, I believe, provide sufficient protection for us moving forward on the technical issues that were raised through the public process. The one issue about the traffic, you could add as a friendly amendment. It was outside of the holding provisions, but it really is something that we will monitor through time as the build-out occurs. It will be a long project, so I'm sure there'll be opportunities to advance certain widenings.
So the mover has indicated that she's open to including that as a friendly amendment. I was the seconder. I am as well. Other speakers? Councillor Helmer.
Sorry, so I was just reading the motion that was passed around before I talked about it, and I have to say, you know, now that the referral has failed, we have the question of whether we proceed with the motion that's in front of us or not. You know, we're really talking about the difference between 1,300 units and 900 units, right? And slightly different configurations of high-density buildings. And I think in the course of the discussion on the referral, sometimes we veered into talking about, you know, making it sound like it's more than what we're talking about. Should there be an extra 400 units on the site? And are the public facilities and services and matters that are being provided, is that enough to justify the bonusing in this particular part of the city, right? That's really what we're talking about. And, you know, I'm always in favor of higher density. You know, I generally support higher density developments. I think if you're going to build something new in an area, you want to build it to the sort of appropriate amount of density not lower than that and not higher than that, right? You want to put as much density as you can where those spots have been identified for higher density. Because if we don't do that, if we're mismatching the densities throughout the city, we'll end up with people trying to put things that are too intense beside things that are lower density. And that, as we know, in many cases, we have all kinds of frustrations around that issue. This is an area right now that is a field, and we're going to build high density residential buildings around it. I'm concerned about what the specifics of the motion were and what the holding provisions are, especially around the drain, because that is a pretty significant issue. You know, how is the rainwater that comes flooding through there and the stormwater that comes flooding through there, how's that going to be handled, and where is the building going to be located in relation to that drain? But I do think that you know, the provisions that are in the motion that Councillor Parker's brought forward and what's in the bylaw, that's going to be sufficient, I think, because if there's going to be a problem from a stormwater perspective, you know, the development's not going to proceed. And we're really dealing with the zoning, and is it appropriate to have this kind of zoning, especially for Site 3? This is within the density that is allowed. Really, the only issue is this environmental, the environmental concern and the urban design concern. So for Site 3, I can support Site 3. For Site 1 and 5, I think I'll support those too. I think my preference would have been to refer it, because I think we could have sorted out some of these things. I think that would have been a better way of doing it. But, you know, we're going to have a high density residential here. I think having slightly taller buildings with slightly more people able to live in them, that's okay. And if we're going to make a mistake one way or the other, I'm okay with making a mistake this way, where we have slightly more intense buildings in this particular part of the city. I think it's going to be fine with this specific location, right? It doesn't make sense everywhere. But I think in this area, if we're going to make a mistake, making this make on the high side is appropriate.
Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Just briefly, two thoughts around it. Once upon a time in the city of London, there was two men by the name of Birnbaum and Katz. And they had this vision of building a community, and it was called West Town Mall. Now, many of you may not remember a place called West Town Mall. Thank you, Councillor Sellied. I knew you wouldn't. But when I came to university, there's this place called West Town Mall, and it really was kind of, when it was built, it was kind of out there. Today we call it Cherry Hill Mall, and it's kind of in the middle of the city. I know Councillor Squire would remember it. Did you go to the Bavarian? Yeah, Bavtav, right? Yeah. So, but those two gentlemen, there's other people that want to confess to it, I know, had a vision. And they built something unique. And now we look back at it 30, 40 years later and go, wow, that was kind of really something. When I was in university, a friend of mine was the owner, his dad was the owner of Burdock Cleaners. And we were in there fixing machines and cleaning out Burdock Cleaners in the early 80s. But that was unique. And in the same way, I think we could say that the Drulos had a similar vision around Wonderland in Oxford and all of that. And then we had a guy by the name of Sifton who had this crazy idea to build something called West 5 that would be a unique community out on the west end of the city. And we put a lot of holding provisions, and Councillor Helmer, you would remember that, when that came forward at Planning Committee to make sure that it developed in an appropriate way. And today we have York Developments with this one. And I remember as chair of planning that we actually were talking about some of these things before that we actually put the transit corridor in place before we had actually selected the site for the recreation center. Because I remember sitting here, Mr. Coxhead remembers sitting here, the night that we had two sites. One was the gravel pits in Byron, and the other was the Southdale Road site. And someone that night had a brilliant idea that we should move ahead with both of them. One should be for the rec center, and one shall be something that we could be proud of maybe 2025 in the gravel pits, which will be an outdoor recreational facility for the city of London. But it all begins with a vision. And I think that's one of the things I see here on this one. So I will be supporting the motion on the floor. I think there's adequate holding provisions to make sure the protections are in place and that the policies get implemented appropriately. Thank you.
Do I have anyone else? I know that the mover of the motion would like to wrap up. Councillor Park.
Thank you. This council's done a lot of work in terms of creating a vision, and as Councillor Deputy Mayor, pardon me, Hubert talked about, here's a piece of that, creating a reality to a vision. Recognizing the fact that a lot of investment's been made in the area of the civic mind. The mayor talked about all that at the earlier onset of the meeting, but I think that this is a hallmark to our term as a council and walking the talk. We talk about building for the future. We talk about access to transit. We talk about all those things, and I see that this development is a step forward in creating that vision into reality. So look forward to the vote on this, and thank you for letting me stand here for about 40 minutes.
It's our pleasure. Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. I'm going to call, based on comments 1, 3, and 5, all three sites together, unless there are any objections. Okay, let's call the question. Moved by Councillor Park, seconded by me. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 11-2.
Thank you very much, everyone. And Councillor Turner, Chair, just one more to go.
Home stretch, Your Worship. This brings us to item number 22, which is 3.9 in the Planning and Environment Committee hymn book. This is with respect to an application at 230 North Center Road. I will put this on the floor.
So, it's been moved by the chair. Any speakers? Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we had our third public participation meeting about this application at planning. And the second PPM was when planning made the recommendation to council, and council supported the recommendation to refer it back to staff because we felt that the community hadn't been involved in the work as we had anticipated they would be, that there would be some work towards lowering or reducing the massing and the density on this site. So in recognition to the applicant, they did reduce the height, brought it down from the application that had been before us, which was 18 stories, and brought it down to 15 stories. Unfortunately, the density really wasn't reduced very much at all, 8 units in total. I believe we're looking at a density of 193 units per hectare in the current application, somewhere around there. It's currently zoned medium density, and I know that there had been some feeling on council that the community wasn't really willing to concede at all or to compromise at all on the height of this proposed development. But, and I'm sure councillors have received emails from the community that the 15 stories that's proposed in this application has actually been accepted by this community. Everybody recognizes that when there's compromise, not everybody gets exactly what they want. So the developer would have preferred, I'm sure, 22 stories, which was their original application. The community would have preferred 6 stories, which is what medium density would allow, and this is what the site is currently, medium density. So and height, it's interesting, when referral was made back, there was no mention of height in the referral. It was about shadowing, it was about massing, it was about density. And so the fact that the height has come down slightly, it really is no surprise that it doesn't satisfy the community. And they're looking for some reduction in density. And the reason is that this is a 1.1 hectare site, and the development is almost a hectare in itself. So there's no space around this development. There's no space around this proposed building for any kind of plantings or green space or amenity space. In addition, this substantial bonusing that's being offered to the applicant is for underground parking. And what the application includes is 1 level of underground parking. So in return for 1 level of underground parking, we're looking at an increase from 75 units per hectare, which is what is allowed under medium density, up to 193 units per hectare. I know some of the comments about the last application that was before us, some of the comments at Planning Committee was, this is a huge increase in density. I think it's like 40% is what we had decided at Planning Committee. It was an increase. The increase here is substantially higher than that. What this applicant is asking for and what staff are recommending is a substantial increase in density, something that we don't normally see outside of downtown. There's some going back and forth about which official plan this should be, this application should be considered. And I think staff have come to the conclusion that it's the 1989 official plan, despite the fact that the London plan is referred to over and over and over again in the staff recommendation, in the staff report. The fact of the matter is this particular policy of Transit Village is under appeal. So this site itself is not under the London plan. It's currently under the 1989 official plan. And that plan allows up to 15 stories max as a bonus. So staff have I believe, come to the table saying that this is adjudicated under the 1989 official plan and not the London plan. Councillor Helmer, under the last application that was before us, spoke about making a mistake in density. And so on the Bostwick application, it's like, there's nothing really else around it. It's a greenfield development. And so making a mistake in density won't really have implications for the community. This will. If we make a mistake here and go to this level of density, there are some real significant and immediate repercussions for the community that's surrounding this area. This established community that's been there for over 20 years. I made a referral, a motion to refer, and Councillor Hopkins seconded that motion at Planning Committee. We lost that vote, unfortunately. I'm hesitant to make that motion again tonight. But having said that, I would like to move referral tonight. I believe the community is there. They're there. They have said, we accept that we're not going to get the height that we want. We accept that this is going to 15 stories. But they are asking us, and they are pleading with this council to ask the applicant to refer this back to staff, to work with the applicant to lower the number of units. And we're not talking a substantial, they know that we are not going to go with 75 units per hectare. But they're asking for some relief here in the density of this building. They're asking for some kind of way to decrease the footprint of this building so that it is not occupying the entire site. So Councillor Hopkins indicated earlier that she will second my motion, so I would like to move referral at this time.
Okay, a motion to refer, and if you could clarify for what purpose? And there is a seconder for this, I understand, Councillor Hopkins.
I would like to refer this application back to staff to work with the applicant to reduce the number of units, reduce the density of this application.
Okay, so referral takes precedence, been moved and seconded. Are there any speakers to the referral? Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I'm more than happy to second the referral back, because I've heard loud and clear from the community for the past number of years that this does not fit. Reducing this building from 22 to 18, now to 15, reducing the density 8 units is not going to work for this community. I don't know where and when we as a council stop listening to what the community's concerns are. Where is the compromise? What is allowed is medium density, 6 stories. That's what is allowed in this area. We're going to 15 with the high density, the setbacks, the landscaping. I have supported a number of infill applications throughout the past number of years where we've looked at the buffering and looked at the space and the setbacks around these infill developments. I think that has to be taken into consideration. I don't see this here at all. I'm not convinced that there is a compromise here at all, and somehow this building is not fitting into an already built-up community.
Any other speakers on the referral? Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. We did have a pretty good debate about this on 3 occasions, and lengthy too. I think one of the challenges when we have public participation meetings, sometimes we go in directions opposite to where we might have heard the majority of submissions from the public. And then often we hear we're not listening. I think what I've observed certainly through my term on planning committee is that this is a committee and a council that listens intently, listens to every word. You look around the horseshoe as people are speaking, everybody looks, watches, turns, and takes in everything that's said. But there are challenges to that, right? I'm a little concerned when I hear there's no compromise. 3 kicks at the can, and the applicant made 3 fairly significant changes to the height itself. Perhaps that there wasn't a change in the density, and I recognize that. But one of the loudest complaints that was heard during the delegations was the shadow effect that might be cast on top of the neighboring seniors building. So there was a very genuine effort to try and reduce that. I think the intent all along certainly was to try and maintain that density, because that's what they were looking for. So the challenge often is that marriage between, or I guess the policy, the general official plan policy, the London plan, was one of the largest public consultation efforts that the city has done. But that, I can recognize that on a very micro level, that might not be recognized, what that meant when the city endorsed that and seemed to be supportive of it, that they may not have recognized that we'd identified transit villages as high density, as areas where we wanted to intensify. But I wouldn't say that that the proposal is contrary to what the 1989 official plan is. That area in that section was designated, that site was designated medium density. The site that was built at low density was designated high density. The contemplation for that area in general was a mix of high density and medium density. And so just to abandon that later, because the principle in the 89 plan was very clearly a fairly significant buildup of density in that area, not to maintain it at low density and not to have medium density and low density. It was high density and medium density. So what we have, a net effect of actually having less density by having one site developed at high density and the rest developed at fairly low to low medium density. The net effect is that it's actually a reduction in density than had been contemplated in the 1989 official plan. But let's take that one step further and take a look at what our policies were as a council when we passed the London plan. We clearly identified that an area for intensification and density. I think we really need to sit and think about what we do as a committee and what we do as council at Planning and Environment Committee. And one of those things is every 2 weeks we hear and approve or deny zoning bylaw amendments and official plan amendments. That's just what we do. So to say that in the OPA, in the official plan or in the zoning, that it's this and that it can't ever change is kind of contrary to everything that the planning committee does. Our function is to assess whether it's appropriate to make those changes. But to say that it's that and it's not going to change and it shouldn't change because it's already that kind of defeats the purpose of the committee. And so as we do that, we have to evaluate through a few different things. One, is it consistent with our official plan and the intent of the policy within the official plan? 2, is it consistent with the provincial policy statements? 3, is it consistent with, or are there any guiding secondary documents, such as an area plan or a secondary plan? In this case, there was no area plan or secondary plan associated with that. There's the primary transit area and the transit village policies that we passed as the London plan. And the intent of the 89 official plan was to see that area developed as high and medium density. So I think it's quite appropriate in this circumstance to do so. I would really discourage council from supporting the referral. I do recognize the intent and the desire of the councillor to make that referral and why, but I think in this circumstance, everything is rather clear, and I think the policy framework that we have has been clearly telegraphed for some time to say that this is an area that we would support such a development.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? This is on the referral. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm a little concerned about the referral, not sure what to do in this case. I'm also concerned about the motion itself. I wonder if we've gotten to the point where through compromise we've come to a lose-lose-lose situation. So I know that staff, I should say the residents weren't satisfied with the amount of density in the 15 or the 20 or the 22. Some of the people said that the height change wasn't a big deal to them, it was density. So if we're going to decide for a larger density in this 15-story building, that we may be making a poorer choice than another. So I want to ask through you to staff, just in terms of the building, the 15 or the 18, which would be the better choice for
So, just a moment, please, Mr. Fleming. We'll deal with this sort of procedurally because you asked a couple of questions. The first is we're dealing with a referral, and this referral is specifically, as I understand it, from the mover and the seconder, not to address the height, but to address the density. And so that's what we're talking about right now. Should this referral be defeated, then the recommendation from the planning committee will come forward, and that's for the 15-story building with the density that we see. That would need to be defeated before any other motion was brought forward, because any other motion would be considered contrary to the recommendation from the committee. And so if you can make an argument for me, and it's going to be a tough one, why you need to know what's better, 15 or 18, so you can deal with the referral, then I'll allow the question, because I want you to have that information to consider the referral and whether you want to support it or not. But I want you to keep your focus and the debate focused on the referral.
Okay. Well, thank you. Your direction's been helpful. I'm not necessarily trying to force something. Maybe since a part of the reason for the density and the problem with it was that there was no, I heard complaints, there was no room on the ground for green space. Maybe I could ask, was that the case for the 18-story building? Is that a question that you would allow to be asked?
Yeah, if you need to know that to deal with the referral, I'll allow it. The question is really focused on the site, Mr. Fleming. Was there green space available on the site with the 18-story? During the debate, it's been pointed out that there's no green space available on the 15-story.
Your Worship, the site plans are not significantly different between the 18 and the 15-story proposal. The density is fairly similar. There might be more opportunity for some amenity space on the taller building because the floor plate isn't quite so big at the base. And certainly the floor plate of the building itself is smaller on the 18-story building. So because you're talking about a similar number of units, not just the base of the floor plate, but the tower portion as well, is smaller on the 18-story building. So as the committee would, or council would know, we did recommend approval of the 18-story. We've also recommended approval of the 15-story.
Councillor?
Okay, well, thank you. So then I presume that, and through you to the councillor, what you believe the residents are looking for is a smaller density and a smaller footprint for them. Okay. So, well, thank you. Although this debate does seem similar to the one we had just prior in terms of our priorities for housing and housing units. The nice thing about the previous one was that there were many affordable units. Was there a number in this one?
Mr. Fleming, the question is there any provisions focused on providing affordable housing in this development?
Your Worship, no, there wasn't. There are some bonusing amenities that were brought forward to committee council for consideration, but affordable housing was not one of them.
Okay. Thank you. I've asked enough questions.
Okay.
I'm
Thank you. On the referral, any other speakers? We'll just have to wait and see if Councillor Turner is an incredible debater. Okay. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the referral, although I do think potentially that the taller building that was skinnier with less massing would be better. I just want to put the building in context to the other matters we dealt with today. So 131 King Street, and we didn't even talk about that one. That's 931 units per hectare. That's a lot of units on a very small space. Right downtown, right on the Rapid Transit Corridor, right by future BRT station. It makes sense that it's such a intense use. Lots of great bonusing features in that one, and certainly that one was approved here tonight. 809 Dundas, 710 units per hectare. We just talked about that one. I was the only one who spoke about it, other than Councillor Squire. Right by a future BRT station. Again, it makes sense. It's going to be higher. It's just steps away. Even Bostwick, which is outside the primary transit area, outside of the built area boundary, 262 units per hectare for the one, 200 for the other, 150 for the third one. This one is sort of near the bottom of that list, right? And this is a site that's in a transit village. It's right by a huge commercial shopping area. It's an area where a lot of people want to live. It's inside the built area boundary. This is a great site for intensification. And so, I think we need to be consistent with what we're doing. I think I would have supported the 18-story building. I voted against referral at that time. I think that would have been preferable. I support this kind of intensity, and the issue that the councillor has raised is that the density is too high. And at 192 units per hectare, I don't agree. I don't agree that that's too high. And so I'm not going to support the referral.
Any other speakers on the referral? Did you want to wrap up? You moved the motion? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that this is very different from anything else that's come before. And the 3 times that this has been technically referred back, this would be the first time we actually referred it back on the grounds of the application itself. The first time we didn't refer it back. It was a received for information report. It came to us because the application wasn't final. It was just to receive information. The second time we referred back because the direction of council was interpreted differently by staff, and council felt that it should have taken a different course, which was direct community engagement. And so that's what happened with the second time that this came before planning. And then the third time was an actual application, a final application for the committee to consider. So there have not really been 3 kicks at the can on this, and it's about a vision. And the vision that staff have for this area is completely in conflict with the vision that the community has. But it's not about density. It's not about high versus medium. The community accepts that this will be a high density site. And everybody is okay with that. It's about how high the density is. And the applicant has been very patient and has shown a willingness to work with the community. And I do believe that if we refer this back, that the applicant will continue to work with the community to lower the footprint, to reduce the density somewhat, but yet still maintain a high-density development here. And this can be a high-density development that serves all of the purposes for the area. It's not in the primary transit area. There is no transit stop in the locale. It is up the street from Masonville Place. We can achieve high density here without this level of intensification.
Thank you. If there are no other speakers, I'll call the question on the referral. Okay, let's open the vote, please. We're voting.
Closing the vote and the motion is lost, 3-10.
Get that microphone on the main motion. So the motion's been moved. Any speakers? Councillor Zaidman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I figured I'd speak to the main motion rather than the referral. I, as the other councillor besides Councillor Helmer, who voted against the referral last time, because frankly, I think what I thought at the time was that we would get a, I think, less optimal result, which I think we're seeing today. The community's not happy, and it's a step down from a nicer development, in my opinion, with the potential for more green space, I think, with a higher tower and a smaller, as I think Mr. Fleming said, a more space on the ground plate. And just, so I'm tempted not to vote for this today, but I think I will support it, in part because I think as Councillor Turner spoke about the swapping of some of the, or not swapping, but some of the densities being reduced in that area, and that was in part because of my dad. And so I figured today I can try and trade that back and put some of that density back into this area. But in all seriousness, I think this is a very fitting site for the density that's proposed. I completely understand why the residents in the area are not happy with it, because they've gotten used to 20 years of this site being vacant and nothing being there. When you live around low density and you don't want to see a massive tower come up next to where you live, that's completely understandable. But we're growing and growing to the city. We need more development, we need more towers, we need more units for people to live in. And frankly, this is probably one of the best sites in the city for a high density tower, given how close it is to so much commercial and office space. So again, I think the 18-story would have been better, and I think frankly that the community would have had a better chance at fighting this at some sort of appeal on that 18-story rather than this 15, because we've gone through so many processes with the developer and council in trying to find an optimal solution. Thanks.
Other speakers on the main motion. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've talked a little bit about the 18 stories. I'm wondering if I can amend this motion to approve either the 15 or the 18 story.
Well, you can't at this time, because the committee recommended a 15-story building, this 15-story building with this density. And so if you were to recommend something that was different than that, then I would say that's contrary. This motion would have to be defeated, and then you could bring forward your next motion. So if you want to speak against this motion and allude to something that you might bring forward, that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Well, Your Worship, if we were to defeat this motion, could we bring forward one to approve the 15 or the 18? And no, okay. So, I mean, I would leave it to the developer and to make that decision. However, if it's not possible, then maybe I could go now to our city planner to ask to just compare and contrast those, because I'm in a position of thinking that I should defeat this in order to support the 18, which I see it has some support from other council members.
Okay, we'll get you an answer to that, Mr. Fleming.
Your Worship, I want to be clear that we did recommend approval of the 15-story building. I think, however, we also did approve earlier the 18-story building. From a form point of view, we believe the 18-story building is better. It's a smaller floor plate. As you can imagine, the configuration of the lower stories being an L shape, that L shape is more massive in the 15-story building. And in terms of the proportions, the design of the building, the 18-story is clearly a better development product in our opinion.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'm mostly satisfied with this. Perhaps one comment on the issue of shadows from the planner, how those might contrast.
Sure. Can you compare the 18-story building, the impact that the shadow had on adjacent properties versus the 15-story building?
Your Worship, I do think the 15-story has a slightly more favorable shadow impact, a little bit less, but it is relatively minor, and because of the shadows that are cast by the buildings to the east already, there really isn't a lot of shadow impact relative to that 18-story building.
Okay, thank you. I think that's adequate.
Other speakers? Okay, there are no other speakers. We'll deal with the committee recommendation. Let's call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 10-3.
Okay, see, don't sell yourself short, Councillor Turner. Okay, committee, I'm in your hands. We just finished the planning committee meeting. We have CAPS, we have the third report of the audit committee, and then I want to provide an opportunity for any outgoing member of council to address council and the community. I think it's going to go fairly quickly, and we could have our dinner break sometime between 7 and 7:30. I've been wrong before, and so I just want to make sure that people are okay with moving forward. Okay, good. So we'll do our dinner break at the conclusion of the meeting, and that way we won't lose the almost dozen viewers that are probably watching right now as well. Okay, let's move to CAPS, please. Chair?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would put the entire report on the floor, except that Deputy Mayor Hubert wants to pull item number 4, which is 2.3. He's declaring a conflict on item 4.
Okay, so let's move the whole report with the exception of 2.3, the 9th report of London Housing Advisory Committee? Yeah. I don't think so. 7. So the Ontario Works Employment Innovations, Bridges Out of Poverty, item 7. Okay.
So I'll put the rest of the report minus item number 7. And I just wanted to make one comment on item number 10, which is the request for proposal for an Indigenous-led licensed childcare and family center. It's a really good news report. The province of Ontario has committed $5.2 million in capital funding and just over $600,000 in operational funding to support in response, Ontario's response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this was one of the calls to action, and the provincial government's response is providing funding to increase the number of licensed childcare spaces and culturally relevant programming off reserve. So the City of London partnered with NAMRIND and they held a number of engagement processes involving Indigenous families and service providers to talk about their experiences with childcare and family support programs here in London. And they learned that they wanted spaces where they could learn their language and culture together with their children, a place where all nations are welcomed, and a place to call their own. And so SOHAC, the Southwest Ontario Health Access Center, was chosen as a successful applicant for the design, the construction, and the operation of this Indigenous-led licensed childcare and early on child and family center, and it will include an 88-space licensed childcare that's co-located with an early on child and family center. It's culturally relevant and based in spirit and language and provides culturally relevant programming. So really good news. I wanted to highlight that, and with that, I'll put the entire report minus number 7 on the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Speakers, Councillor Usher, please go ahead.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a quick general comment, and it's to do with the entire agenda, but more particularly 3 or 4 of them, and I won't bring them out, but I just want to identify the fact that every time I see the agenda for CAPS, I always think about the compassionate city I always think about how compassionate we are in this city as a corporation and all the things that we do, as well as many, many entities and endeavors out there. And I've been asked to say this because one of the things that we are a member of the Charter of Compassion. We're the first Canadian city that became a compassionate city. And I just want to drill that in so that we can always think about that and remain a compassionate city. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank staff for supporting this continuously with these endeavors.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm taking a second look at the number 2.9, sorry, which was the child center. This doesn't specifically refer to child reach. It does refer to early on funding and a bid that might have incorporated. I'm not sure who the proponents were to this, so I'll just recuse if I could, just out of abundance of caution. The reason for that, my wife is an employee of Child Reach, which doesn't receive early on funding.
Your Worship, I believe there was one bid received, and it was SOHAC.
Yep, that's helpful. I didn't want to disclose anything if there was anything that was confidential in that. Okay, thank you.
Other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. We're voting.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to go manual. I'm closed out, so I'm manual yay.
Pardon me? Deputy Mayor Hubert's Emmanuel, yay.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 13-0.
Okay, Your Worship, I'll put item number 7 on the floor, which is the evaluation of the Bridges Out of Poverty and Circles program. And it's another really good news report. I want to, through you, thank staff for this one and the last report as well. I don't know if council recalls, but during the multi-year budget, we voted to increase the funding for this Circles program, and we were able to add, at that time, 2 additional circles here in London, and I'm really pleased that we did that because through the report, you can see the results we've had. I know that part of the report says that the individuals who are involved in the Circles program are more motivated, confident, and more engaged in the labor force. They're economically self-sufficient, and that results in a direct savings to Ontario Works. Some of the highlights of the report: London's Bridges Out of Poverty and Circles initiative has grown to be the largest circle location in Canada. We've developed the first youth and young adult focused circle in Canada, which is really significant, especially because child and youth poverty in London is such a significant problem. 21 individuals and their families have graduated, and 72% of these graduates have reached their goals of education and employment and attaining sustainable income. And the financial savings to Ontario Works from all sources are growing and expected to reach over $430,000 per year in 2019. So this was also, Circles was identified during the work of the poverty panel, and in our final report, London for All, Circles was identified as one of the programs in London that really is working, and a program that we identified as something to receive additional funding, because that was one of the recommendations: increase funding to programs that are working. And so we did that, and I'm really pleased to see the results.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. We're voting.
Closing the vote, Councillor Hopkins. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12 with 1 recused.
Okay, let's move then to 8.5, the third report of the Audit Committee. Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to present the entire report. But I do want to highlight one thing on the report, and it's a bit of a thank you to Sumit Kular. And many of you may not have had the privilege of attending an audit committee meeting. And Sumit is a volunteer who sits on the committee for 4 years and brings his technical expertise to the city as a CPA. And a gracious, kind, thoughtful man who has really served this committee extremely well over the past 4 years, and we owe him our gratitude. I've really enjoyed his contribution. I think all of the members have. He has not applied to return. I don't know what we did to him, but we do owe him a debt of gratitude, and we thanked him at the last committee, but publicly I want to thank him as well. So I'll put the whole report on the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Any speakers? We'll call the question. We're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Okay. I wonder, Deputy Mayor, if you would one last time move the report from last evening, SPPC.
One last time into the breach. The SPPC report, 12th meeting from last evening. I'll put the entire report on it. I don't recall that there were any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I'll put the entire report on.
Okay. Any discussion? Let's call the question. Voting. I don't see that.
Councillor Hubert, Councillor Usher, and Councillor Safeman. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
And the 20th report of council in closed session. I wonder, Deputy Mayor Hubert, if you would move that as well. This may well be the last motion moved and passed by this council, with the exception of bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 20th report of council in closed session, we report the following. Number one, property acquisition, 138 Wellington Road Bus Rapid Transit Project is a procedural matter pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act. The following recommendation before the council in closed session for the purpose of considering whether a recommendation should be forwarded to council for deliberation and a vote in public session. That it be noted that Municipal Council received a information report relating to the acquisition of property at 138 Wellington Road in relationship to the Bus Rapid Transit Project in the amount of $245,000. Second item, property acquisition at 449 Hill Street. That is a procedural matter pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act. Following recommendation be forwarded to council in closed section for the purpose of considering whether a recommendation should be forwarded to council for deliberation and voted public session. That it be noted that the Municipal Council received information report relating to the purchase of property at 449 Hill Street in the amount of $333,255 for the purpose of a new Indigenous-led licensed child care and family center was received.
Members, all right if I call that together? Yes, Councillor Turner, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Worship. With respect to 138 Wellington, I'd just like to declare a conflict as I own property within the area.
Thank you. On both 449 Hill Street and 138 Wellington Street, declare pecuniary conflict of interest as my family owns a neighboring property.
Okay, let's deal with one and then the other. Okay, we'll deal with Wellington because it's in the queue, and then we'll deal with Hill Street after that.
Councillor Hopkins. Closing the vote and the motion carries 11 with 2 recused.
Okay, let's deal with Hill Street now.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 12 with 1 recused.
Okay, colleagues, deferred matters, there are none. Inquiries, I understand there's at least one. Councillor Zafin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I began inappropriately addressing this yesterday at SPPC, so I'm going to address it as an inquiry tonight a bit more appropriately. So as I started discussing yesterday in reading over some of the new provincial government's policy on the citing of cannabis stores, it reads mostly as publishing regulations on the citing of cannabis stores, only really stipulating that these being 150 meters away from schools, and that's the only real stipulation in the provincial policy on where these stores can be located. Now, knowing that we already approved a policy that essentially was a recommendation to the province on what we would like as a buffer space, which was quite a bit more than that, also community centers, pools, a number of other facilities. I just wanted some clarification as us going forward if this policy is still relevant, and then you know, for people that might be looking or interested in these types of stores in our community, should they be following what the provincial regulations say, which I would assume would take precedent over our own policy, but I wanted to have that asked tonight.
So we'll go to Mr. Fleming for that. I believe, or Mr. Kotsifas, the stores will be opening April 1st, I think it is, 2019. Mr. Fleming.
Your Worship, I'll just stick to the part that relates to the direction that Council gave to planning staff, and that was to continue with our work on official plan policies and zoning relating to the siting of cannabis retail stores. The landscape's changed considerably with the new legislation and the regulations now in place, and it appears as though that kind of planning approach where there's a distinction between a cannabis retail store and other retail stores is not something that is empowered to municipalities. However, what we would like to do is report all of this out in a more comprehensive way relating to that issue. There is also a staff cannabis working group that has been formed, and they are working through all of the issues. There's a substantial number of issues associated with the legislation. So they are, I think, looking at reporting out before the end of the year, December 17th. And so there's many other issues that come to bear with the new legislative approach, as well as just cannabis becoming legalized, and those issues will be addressed at that time.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for that. I think it's very helpful, and glad to hear, obviously, with enforcement and lots of other issues that will have to be dealt with. So good to hear that that working group has been started and more information will be coming forward. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, and I do have to say, I never anticipated that there would be a staff cannabis working group in 2010 when I was elected to council, but there you have it. A lot can happen in 8 years. Any other inquiries? Okay. Emergent motions. There are none. So at this time, what I would like to do is invite outgoing council members to address council and the community should they choose. And we can work our way around the horseshoe if we like. I think that would be most appropriate. I'd like to give you, Councillor Armstrong, our longest serving councillor, the first opportunity.
Well, thank you, Worship. And first of all, I look forward to the new opportunities, having more time now on my hands. And so I did want to, first of all, I've already, talked with our administrative staff and thank them, but I want to thank the senior administration for their support over these many, many years. Obviously, a lot got done in my ward. I'm very pleased. In fact, I contemplated what's next because, we've got community centers, we've got a new fire hall. We pretty well have everything if we can get one thing finished, which I'm sure it will. So I guess when I started council, I think a lot of the community said that, we don't get our fair share. They don't say that anymore. In fact, we have things that you won't find in other wards in the community. We have everything. There is no list for me, to look at, and because everything's been covered. So I think I wanted to also not just thank our senior administration, but from the bottom to the top administration. Over the years, I've had so much support from QP 101, QP 107, and so I thank them. I thank all the city employees. Of course, I want to recognize takes to be here. Your family does have to make some sacrifices, and certainly my wife would have liked to have been here tonight, but she's in Queen's Park and doing what she needs to do. But I know she's live streaming the meeting, and so I thank her, obviously my children, and for the sacrifice that they've had to make over the years. So thanks again, Your Worship.
Thank you. And let's move then to Deputy Mayor Hubert. Yeah, actually, colleagues and anyone watching, Councillor Ridley also asked Deputy Mayor Hubert to read a letter. Unfortunately, she's at FCM and cannot be here. So I think what Deputy Mayor Hubert will do is read Councillor Ridley's remarks first.
Thank you. And I know Councillor Ridley is watching live streaming. She was supposed to be at a dinner at 7 p.m., but she's holding over and watching. I'm sure Councillor Morgan is also watching. And she writes the following: please accept my regrets for missing this last council meeting of the 2014-2018 term. I'm away representing the city at FCM. I'd like to take this opportunity to share a few thoughts and comments. First and foremost, I'd like to say it really was an honor and privilege to hold the position of councillor for Ward 10. When I began this journey, I did it because I had a vision for our community. I wanted to make a positive change for the next generation and to help build a city where our children and their children would have opportunities to stay in this city and love it as I do. I'm excited for the next chapter for me, for my family, and for my city. Through the support of our community, my family and friends, I've had the opportunity to work towards this vision. I worked hard every day. I made myself available to the community day in and day out. I spent time learning from staff and from the residents and learning how to get things done. My favorite moments were the times I spent time in my neighbors' living rooms, porches, and kitchens, helping them to solve their problems and realize their visions. I helped the community realize that through their elected official, that they have a voice, that government is not for the people, but that government is the people, and that every voice matters and deserves to be heard. I'm ending my term very proud of the work that we as a council have accomplished and what I have contributed. In November 2014, Councillor Van Meerbergen stated that the 2010-2014 council had left the city better than they found it, and that he fully expected that the next council would leave the city better than they found it. I believe we did. The 2014 to 2018 Council has completed a significant number of infrastructure projects past the London Plan, increased road safety, improved transit options for Londoners. London has been recognized as a leader at the provincial and federal level in many things. We should be proud of the accomplishments. I can say that we left the city better than we found it, and I fully expect the 2018 to 22 Council to do the same. I want to thank the people of Ward 10 for trusting me, teaching me, and supporting me. I never took lightly the trust of the community and worked hard every day to serve you well. I want to thank my colleagues for an amazing 4 years. Each of you bring a different perspective and point of view to our discussions, and I learned so much from you. We all enter public service with ideals and vision. We go about our work in different ways, but we come from the same place and do it for the same reason, to serve our community. The work accomplished by Council has been achieved only through the dedication of the civil servants who took our vision and implemented it in the community. I would like to thank the entire City of London staff team who come to work every day to make the lives of people of London better, and for supporting Council and councillors to make impacts in the community. My family have been my biggest supporters since always, but even more so over the past 4 years. It has never just been me that served, it has been my entire family. My accomplishments over this term of council are theirs as well. I wish the 2018 to 22 council all the best for a prosperous term. Work well, and work together, for the city's future is in your hands. Virginia Ridley, Councillor, Ward 10. So after 12 years, it's arrived. Now I have to get through this. The day to say goodbye to this chamber, a different chamber than I entered. Actually, it was a totally different configuration in that day. But I do so with mixed emotions. I will truly miss the opportunity to make a difference in this way. I am proud of the accomplishments and changes that we have made, specifically in Ward 8. But right across the city. I've always seen myself as a city councillor elected from Ward 8. And so I have traveled from north to south, from east to west, and I'm really proud of what we've accomplished right across the city. From parks and rec centers to roads, recycling and development, jobs and services to the most vulnerable of our community, we have made a difference. But we have been gifted with the blessing of service. To those who much has been given, much is also required. I have been blessed by, first and foremost, my family. They have served this community by allowing me the freedom to dedicate time, energy, and focus in the community. To my wife, Joan, who is the most gracious and tenacious person, I owe an unpayable debt of gratitude. Without her shared commitment and some of her advice, frequently her advice, she's more of a political junkie than I am. My service, frankly, would not have been possible. To Alexandra, Nick, and Zach, you understand what service means and the value of that investment. To the legion of people in the community who have encouraged and engaged with me over the years, your belief in our community and the democracy we live in, where people have a voice, has truly both blessed me, molded me, and inspired me. To my esteemed colleagues on council, both this council and the past councils, through your service you have gifted to this community, I have learned so much. From Tom Gosnell and Gina Barber, Gord Hume and Susan Eagle, Cheryl Miller and Roger Crancy, to Anne-Marie DeSico-Bess, Joni Beckler, Harold Usher, Nancy Branscombe, Judy Bryant, and to each one of you over the past 4 years. You've all brought unique perspectives that have all become a part of my political worldview. I have been blessed by the service of city administration. Jeff Fielding, Tim Doby, Art Zudema, Martin Hayward have all led highly skilled leadership teams that have graciously led, respectfully engaged me. I leave counting many of them as friends. Together we made London a better place to live, a better place to work, a better place to live. But behind them is so many city staff who every day come to work and get it done on behalf of all of us. It has truly been a pleasure, a gift, to work alongside of so many unsung heroes. And now to the next chapter. Yes, the most frequently asked question is, what are you going to do with all your time? Well, I look forward to discerning and exploring what the blessing of service will bring in the weeks, the months, and the years ahead, because I'm not done. I don't believe in retirement. I just believe in next chapters. So to all of you, thank you very much. It truly has been my blessing to be a part of this City Council for the last 12 years, and for the last 4 to serve all of you as Deputy Mayor as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Hubert. Councillor Usher.
Well, Mr. Chair, fellow councillors, staff, the public, a quarter of my life has been spent in this room, on this building, in this vocation. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. I just want to give you some statistics of some of the things I've been through. When I started here, the population of London was 335,000 people. And we had 8.9% of the population being visible minority. And for 3 terms, in fact 5 terms, people used to say to me, London is not ready for somebody like you. But my constituents proved them wrong. And they voted me the 3rd time, by the way, because I did win the first 2 times. Today, the population of London is 385,000 people. And we have 19.9% of the population as a visible minority. That's 1/5. I think that that's great, you know, because it's necessary. But I want to say something that you may or may not like. When we had 8.9% of the population being visible minority, the workforce here was only about 4%, except for Dearness Home. Dearness Home had 36%. And when you put it in, what Dearness Home had with the rest of the population, it went up a little. Today, according to the information that we had earlier this year, we have 14%. So we still have a way to go, but we have improved. And that's why I wanted to bring that up first. But the skyline of London has changed. We didn't have very many tall buildings. Now we have a whole lot. We did have one London Place when I came here, but we've had a whole lot more. I went up on the roof there 2 nights ago, and I looked down and I saw all these tall buildings. And with those that we just approved tonight, it will change again. It will continue to change. Some of the development that occurred since I came, Westminster Township was just becoming accustomed to being a part of London. And we had a lot of problems with the Double 12 site, with them accepting the Double 12 site. We had to work out a formula that is one of the best today to have a dump site right in the midst of our city. It was a long distance call from London to Lambeth. You didn't know that. Even though Lambeth was annexed, I used to work for Bell, so I know that. I didn't charge them, but we charged them. The land servicing strategy had just begun. And out of that, you could see what has happened. Budweiser Garden was in the planning stage. In fact, there was a building at the corner of the Dundas and Talbot that we tried to save, but we walked through it and it was just crumbling. So what you see there is the same building, a replica of the same building, not the same bricks. We went out and bought the same bricks to match the building that was there. That's why you see a corner looking like that. The Central Library was still on Queen Street. And the market was just a little over a year old, the new market as we know it today. Those are just some of the changes. Veterans Memorial Parkway, Wellington Street South, everywhere north of Fanshawe Park and west of London was all forest. Look what it is today. Great development. It's practically half of London, by the way, over the past 20 years. I just thought that that was very good. We had 7 wards. 2 councillors per ward, plus a board of control of 4 people, and the mayor, 19 people. I've been through 4 mayors. Is it 4 or 5? Maybe 5.
Doesn't matter.
8 city managers. You're the 8th, Martin. But we had 7 since I came here. And as far as city engineers, I've been through 6 of them. You're the 6th, but they were all good. And so were the city managers. My group, was the first occupants of the offices that we have on the 3rd floor. Before that, they were down in what is now conference room 4, like a cow pen. They were all crumpled in there, and all they had were desks. Not only that, they had 1 administrative assistant for 14 of us, plus the 4 Board of Control members. But we didn't have internet. I mean, we had it, but it was just coming to fruition. So I shared Ward 6 at the time with another councillor. Ward 6 is now Ward 11 and Ward 12. Does it run better? Maybe it does, right? We have good councillors, though. From the federal government, we hardly got any money. It was in 2002 that Jack Layton proposed to Finance Minister Paul Martin that we should get some of the gas tax back. And Paul Martin, at the FCM conference in Hamilton in 2002, he said, sure, I don't see why the municipalities shouldn't get a little bit of the gas tax back. And he went back to Ottawa, and Mr. Kretschmer spanked his hands and took away some of his responsibility. But soon after he became Prime Minister, and we started getting the gas tax, and it went up from 1% to 2% to 3%. Now it's a fixed amount, indexed. Plus, as a result of FCM, we're getting a lot more money because we have a seat at the table, and the federal government is listening to us. In fact, right as we speak here, there are 2 of our colleagues in Ottawa doing advocacy with the MPs, so that in the next budget, there will be something in there for municipalities. So all this money that we're getting from the federal government is a lot because of the advocacy of Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So you ask me, why is it that I was so attached to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities? Because it was bringing money into the municipalities. Because community building and city building is nation building. And that's our motto in FCM. And AMO follows same, because a lot of the money that the federal government decided to give, the province decided to match it. And that time it was 33, 33, 33. We're trying to make it 40, 40, 20 now, but that's for another day. The police budget was $48 million. It's $106 million, $109 million, I believe it will be next year. Think about it. It was 48 million. And we were trying to cut it because it was too much. LTC had 175 buses on the road. Today they have 217 buses on the road. You might say that's not a whole lot, but you know it could create congestion. The service hours that LTC used to do their business was 490,000 Today, it's 644,000 to serve the community because we have grown. Those are important things to know. So I owe appreciation to lots of people, like all my colleagues. First, like everyone else, definitely to my family. I have to say to you that if I didn't have the wife that I have, I'd get myself into a lot of trouble because I'm very outgoing and she keeps pulling me back. And she's very respectful and respectable. And she knows to tell me when to draw the line and where to draw the line. So I certainly appreciate her tremendously. And my 3 daughters, same. They always pull me back when I try to go too fast. And I really, really appreciate my family. They were like everyone else, like Paul, they were my big supporters. To the staff, I have had tremendous respect for the staff that I have dealt with throughout my years at the SLT level and below that, because every single time that I needed something for my constituents, they were there. Even up to today, I had a little problem, and one of the staff members came to see me. George, I just want you to know it's one of your staff members. And he explained to me what the situation was so that I could speak to the constituents. It's very important that we could have that type of communication, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-a-few. So the city staff, all the boards and commissions were the same. I have a lot of admiration for them. And the city clerk's office, I don't know what I would do without the city clerk's office. More especially, our administrative staff in our office. I know that I pulled you because I wanted more support. I wanted 2-to-1, you gave me 3-to-1, and that was enough, but they are tremendous. I have to tell you that. They've learned a job, and they do it well, and they look after us, and they make us look good. And I want to thank you for that. And that goes for you too. My constituents have been tremendous. I don't know what it is about me and my constituents, but I'm not going to be very humble. They love me. And I appreciate them, and I serve them well, because they're the ones who sent me here. and like the deputy mayor, I never felt that I was here for me. I felt that I was here for them, but I was also here for the entire city. You said it well. We're city councillors. We're not Ward 12. We came from Ward 7, Ward 6. In my case, I came from Ward 12. They sent me to sit in this seat to make that decision. All those decisions, most of the decision here that we made tonight had nothing to do directly with my ward. But they have to do with London, and any part of London, any decision we make for London means a whole lot to all of us. I believe that faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life. And I believe that service to humanity is the best work of life. That's part of the reason I was here, because I felt that I had something to offer, and I wanted to make that offer. So, I wish the new council very well. I've met most of them, and I admire them, but I admire all my colleagues in the past also, because we all came here for the same reason. We came here because we felt we could offer something to the community, and the constituents felt that we could do that. So we were here doing that, and I think that we did it with ambition, with credibility, with integrity and honesty. We may not always agree, but that's fine. But I do wish you well. I wish you and the new council as well, and I wish those gone before me well also. I just want you to know that service is the rent we pay for being on this earth. And if you have faith in God and in yourself, lots of people will believe in you. Just make sure that you are one of them. I'm only a phone call away. I know you won't call me, but that's okay. But I'm still only a phone call away. I've got things I want to do for myself. I made this decision based on a decision that my wife and I agreed on, that I should move on. got to make room for somebody else. I think the person who is going to replace me is going to do an exceptional job. I know her well, and God bless you all. Thank you very, very much for having me here, for giving me this opportunity. It's the best vocation that I could think of. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
Is it a puppy? That was sensational. Councillor Park, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's funny when you think about one term, you think singular, you think one, but you don't think about the thousands of hours of meetings, phone calls, emails, all sorts of things, and they really do add up. Over the last 4 years, I've been exceptionally proud to have had the opportunity to work with some of the most amazing people that I'm now honored to know. Colleagues, we've been through a lot. We've done a lot. We've agreed, we've disagreed, we've agreed to disagree, but at the end of it all, we've made significant progress over the last 4 years. The London Plan, the multi-year budget, our move forward, Dundas Place, Blackfriars Bridge, billions of dollars in construction and development, Central Library revitalization, Bostwick Community Centre, Lambeth and Hamilton Road community improvement plans, 2 new BIAs, and a third on the way south of Horton Street. I'm tired, and that's only a paragraph, and that's just but a snapshot of the last 4 years. But I do think that one of the things that we most sincerely must be the most proud of is the foundational relationship of trust that we've created with our Indigenous communities and neighbours, with the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape peoples. Without that foundation of trust, there's no step forward to take in terms of creating actual truth and reconciliation. Over the next 4 years, the new council will have to create their own relationship of trust, and I hope that that work has already begun. I have to say, going forward, civic leadership and community leadership need to move past just land acknowledgements, because acknowledgements are just words. What we need to do as a community is move forward with critical action, and that action needs to be decided upon together. I think it's important for anyone in leadership to remember the significance of the 2-0 Wampum Belt, and that is to remember peace and friendship as you continue to move along in the parallel on the river of life with your respective journeys, but do not steer each other's vessels, stay in your own lane. I remember 4 years ago when I was waiting to come take my chair down here, listening to the outgoing councillors, and I remember Judy Bryant, my predecessor, put the call to action to this council and said, make no small plans. She talked about the importance of keeping vision focused on the big picture. She put that call to action, and that's a similar call that I would like to put to the next council. Once you are sworn in, you will receive the blueprints, building blocks, and materials to continue to build this amazing city. Well-researched plans like the London Plan, Shift Rapid Transit, Development Charge Bylaw, 2019 Growth Management Implementation Strategy, London for All, and the Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy. I implore the new council to do their research, because soon you will have the accurate details that can help you make educated and informed decisions. And when it comes to your daily work of your office and constituency, do not get distracted by the minutiae. Bring those issues up to the policy level, because that is what your job is as a city councillor, to deal with policy. The day-to-day operations are the responsibility of our exceptionally talented and committed staff. You will soon learn just how lucky this community is to have them. And if you're not, they'll get recruited elsewhere, so let's do our best to keep you all here. Learn your council procedural bylaw, because she who knows the rules, rules. To our office support staff, Elizabeth, Melanie, Ashley, Lyradonna, Amanda, Ian, and Dawn Burns and Evelina Skalski as well. Thank you for your focus, professionalism, and talent. Your ability to go above and beyond. I love them so much. Your ability to go above and beyond for my constituents has meant the world to me. And it shows just how much you love this city, because each day you make it better for everyone. Oh, to our brothers and sisters in QP Local 107, 101, and Dearness 302, pardon me, Unifor. Thank you for the hard work you do for the people of London. Many of you do not have easy jobs. You see and work with people during some of the most difficult times in their life. And your assistance to walk with them through that difficulty shows great empathy, compassion, and dedication. You are the face of the corporation, you are the ambassadors, and watching you work over the last 4 years has made me really proud. Thank you, London, for the honor to serve you for the last 4 years. I hope to come back as a volunteer and do whatever I can for our community because I love this place, and if I didn't, I wouldn't live here. So thank you to my colleagues. I take your friendship with me going forward, and my good friend here and I are a good phone call away, or you know where we live, just stop by.
Councillor Zaveman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I honestly thought that I would just not say anything tonight because that's generally what I do here is try and keep things quiet and speak when I need to. And is this really necessary? I mean, it's really nice, and I think I will say a few words. And I think upon my colleagues have spoken so nicely, I'll try and say a few nice things as well. But again, just as most of my colleagues here know, I generally try to live my life by a policy which is say less and do more. And that is generally how I try to conduct myself here as well, I think, as everyone probably has seen throughout the last 4 years. And, you know, my Zadie, which in Yiddish is grandfather, and my dad, they each had their own hand in shaping and impacting our community in a really great way. And that for me was one of my inspirations really to get involved in our community and our city and want to have an impact here at City Hall. They obviously did it in a more growth and development perspective with some community involvement as well. I, on the other hand, for some reason thought that this would be a better choice as how to impact our community, putting myself through this, but it's honestly been such a tremendous pleasure and honor. The last 4 years, it definitely didn't go the way that I expected. You know, if someone had told me 4 years ago that I would have had to take time off for a brain injury, I would have said, no way. You know, the way this term started off was incredible, and to get sidelined like that was really disheartening. But I'm so grateful for family, friends, loved ones, and most especially just constituents who reached out to support me, because frankly, without all of them, I wouldn't have got through it. And if someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be standing here today, pretty much fully functional, I don't know if I would have believed it. It was such a scary time. And so to be back here, you know, just doing what we need to do here for our community, it means so much, and to have the opportunity to be here means so much. You know, not only was that over the 4 years, you know, sadly this year I lost my dad, who, even though he was sick for the last, you know, over a decade, still provided a lot of support and you know, joy in my life. And so losing him was a real loss to not just myself and our family, but our community. But I know that if he was here now and could tell me this, he'd probably say, I'm pretty happy that you're not going to be in the spotlight anymore, because he never wanted his kids to be in the spotlight. And so this is, so it's bittersweet. And then to round out the last 4 years, I got engaged. So you know, there's lots of ups and downs in life, and I think, frankly, I'm leaving these last 4 years on a high, which is really incredible. Not only that, but you know, frankly, over the last 4 years, again, don't necessarily talk much or brag much about it, but I think with the help of council, not only for Ward 14 but the entire city, we've been able to accomplish such a great deal. And I know that I'm leaving this job with my head held high, knowing that we've been able to do so much. I know the number of initiatives that I tried to work on, a number of them were successful, some not, but a number of them were, and it was so incredible to see that change in action and actually happen. The last two things I want to say, one is just a huge thank you to the staff in our office. Everyone that I think has spoken to that, but it really bothers me, the crap that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. The number of people that call in and oftentimes abuse our staff in our office because I don't know, frankly, but they think that people can just call in and say whatever they want. And the staff in our office deal with so much on behalf of not just us, but the entire city. And I don't think people have an appreciation for that. And I want to make sure that that is spoken loud and clear tonight. And I think for my colleagues, it already has been. But they are tremendous, and I don't think they get enough thanks for what they do. And they are such such a treasure that we have in our city. So thank you to them. And then a thank you to my colleagues for the last 4 years. It's really been quite an adventure and a really great one. I'm looking forward to what's next for everybody here. I think one thing which I frankly was a little worried about was, when there was the last council, when we came in, 11 of us were new, which is a lot of new people and a lot to get up to speed on. And, thankfully we had Harold and Paul and Bill and the mayor here to help us on this way through this, and I think we got up to speed pretty quick. But I'm glad to know that going into the next council, there's going to be a lot of institutional memory sticking around to come in with the new knowledge, and I think that's going to bode really well for the next 4 years of council, which is great to see. And to civic administration and our entire city staff, again, thank you. We can't do what we do without you, and frankly, again, we are the ones that end up making the decisions, but all of the hard work that really goes into so much that happens in the city, so many great things, is all because of you. So thank you very much. And I'll just finish with saying that it's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
So I guess that's it. We'll move on to bylaws. Earlier tonight, I saw a number of council members-elect that were here in attendance. I saw Elizabeth Pelosa, I saw Steve Lehman, Steve Hillier is here, and Mayor-elect Ed Holder was here as well. And I wish he had stayed because I had this great joke. I was going to say, it's always good to see you sitting to the left of me. So I'll have to save that for another day. Colleagues, change isn't always easy. In fact, change is rarely easy. Sometimes there is strong opposition to change. And I don't have to tell you that because you and I have lived that for the past 4 years. And we had the responsibility and we had the privilege to lead during that time. I am profoundly proud of what we've been able to accomplish working together, and I will be forever grateful for this experience. I was reflecting back today on what it was like to be elected in 2010. I was called the junior councillor because I was 15 years younger than the next oldest councillor, and it wasn't a flattering term. One of the hardest things about serving during the 2010 council was that for most issues, I knew before I got here how the vote would go. I knew many, many, many times the vote would be 8-7. One of the best things about serving during this term, and it even happened a couple of times tonight, the 2014 to 18 council, when we have a vote after a contentious issue, I see 15 of us look up at the screen to see how it went. I see us waiting with anticipation to hear from the city clerk, and she almost always gets it right and doesn't give us a heart attack. That's what we were elected to do. This was, as a couple of councillors have indicated, a huge change. And these waves of change come every 10 or 20 years. And when that happens, you have to jump on that wave and you have to surf for as long as you can. We were elected to work together. We were elected to focus on the big ideas and to move this city forward. I think that 2014 to 2018, that this term of council, as many others in the past have been seen, will be seen as a turning point for our community. Think about it. Ms. Livingston likes to say within the first 100 days, we came up with a strategic plan. It was actually 88. And so I want to remind everyone that's returning that that's the kind of caliber of staff that we have, that they can deliver within 100 days, a strat plan. A strat plan that we learned last night is 97.4% on track. A strat plan that at its core, all 15 of us supported, and at its core, the focus was to build a better city. And we didn't stop there. We said we wanted to build a better city for all. And I think that that's exactly what we've done. We followed it up with a multi-year budget that's being studied by municipalities across Ontario and across Canada. And the last term of council deserves the credit for this. They started the ball rolling with Rethink London and the London Plan. And we've seen that move forward a great deal. That's a vision for the next 20 years for our community that will change the way we move, the way we grow as a community. From an arts and culture perspective, I mean, what can I say? We have the Junos coming in 2019. We have so many things to be proud of over the past 4 years. Think about the riverfront and how that's moving forward. Think about downtown London and Dundas Place and how that's moving forward. Think about the largest ever commitment of funding from a provincial government of $170 million towards a rapid transit system for our community, which is the foundation of the London Plan. Think about what we've done for our most vulnerable. Just to name a few great steps that this council has led on, the Syrian refugee crisis. If we think about the size of London compared to other municipalities in Ontario and Canada, and the contribution that we made as a community to deal with that crisis, to welcome new friends and neighbors to our community, that is something that we need to be exceptionally proud of. The London for All work that the United Way is leading today. Making transit more affordable for some, making transit free for others. How we're dealing with the opioid crisis that is sweeping across our country. We were the first community in Ontario to open a temporary overdose prevention site within days of being allowed to. And that's incredible. And again, we heard today at an economic development session that our economy is booming. Indeed, as Councillor Ridley suggested, it's better to leave a job in better shape than when we got here. That's exactly what all of us have done. My personal goal was to work with as many people as possible to build a better city for us, for our kids, and for our grandkids. And I think that we've taken great strides. So to senior staff, to the thousands and thousands of employees who choose to work here, who choose to put up with some of the difficulties that Councillor Zafman so clearly articulated, you could have chosen any line of work. You could have chosen to serve anywhere in this community or somewhere else. You chose to serve here, and you're making a difference. And I know that you work hard to make sure that the people that you work with understand that too. To my colleagues, thank you for your passion. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for doing a job that I know at times can be thankless. I know that at times you can be as busy as you choose to be, as you can stand in a role like this, because there is no off switch to email or to the telephone or to the level of care that you have for the community and what you want to accomplish. There's no question that we stand on the shoulders of giants. There's no question that we have moved the community forward, that we have created a platform for the 2018 to 22 council to springboard off of and to move the city further forward. And I have to say, I felt this at the beginning of the term, and I feel it today. I have never been more optimistic about the future of London. Thank you for this opportunity to serve. Thank you very much.
This is your gavel to take with you as a memento and a gift from.
Here's your gavel. What's your hurry? Okay. Thank you very much. You know, it's funny how we formatted this meeting, and I'll take responsibility for it. We get to do bylaws now, probably the most exciting part of a council meeting. And I'll draw your attention, if I could please, to the bylaws listed within the agenda, plus I believe there are 3 added bylaws?
Yes.
Okay. And do we have any conflicts on those?
No, but you possibly would like the 3 separate.
Okay. So we'll deal with the three addeds, dealing with the sites 1, 3, and 5 at Boswick, after we deal with the majority of the bylaws. So let's have that come up on screen. I'll look for a motion, first reading. Councillor Van Holst, second by Councillor Cassidy. Yep, please, go ahead.
I just want to make sure the Wellington Street property is pulled because I do have a conflict on that. Great.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, if I may, Bill, I think it's 631, the North Centre, if that could be pulled as well.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Cassidy?
And 617, that's also North Center Road.
Okay. So we'll deal with North Center Road and Boswick separately. We'll just take a moment to make sure we get the numbers correct and up on screen. Okay, so let's deal with all bylaws with the exception of the addeds and with the exception of 617 and 631, which are related to 230 North Center Road. Just look for another mover and a seconder on that motion. Councillor Van Holst, second by Councillor Helmer. This is first reading. We'll call the question. Manually, yay. Councillor Hopkins voting manually, yay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Second reading, moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Zafman. Any discussion? Let's call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Third reading, moved by Councillor Zafman, seconded by Councillor Squire. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Okay, let's deal with bylaws 617 and 631. They have to do with 230 North Center Road. First reading, moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. We'll call the question. We're voting.
Councillor Hopkins. Closing the vote and the motion passes 12 to 1.
Second reading. Oh,
That's why I was waiting. Can it be corrected in the record? Thank you, clerk.
okay. For anyone watching, Councillor Cassidy accidentally voted yea for a motion she indicated she wanted to vote nay for, so that'll be corrected in the record. And there are 2 more chances now to get it right. Second reading, moved by Councillor Zafman, seconded by Councillor Park. Any speakers? Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, Your Worship. I know I was overwhelmingly defeated on this, but I'm urging my colleagues to reconsider. The committee really did compromise on this, and they really would like to see some lower density there.
Other speakers? Deputy Mayor Hubert?
I voted in favor, but I'm going to vote against it, and I'll tell you why, but not for the reason that you have. I think that the 18 was a better plan. It would give the same density, but more space around it, so I'll be voting against it, but for a different reason than you think.
Other speakers?
I'm channeling my inner Jim Barber, by the way.
Councillor Van Holst?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cassidy. You accidentally voted for it. I accidentally seconded it, but I was also for hoping to vote against that because for the same reason. I think we might have been better off with the 18.
Just a little while ago, I remember saying we look up at the screen to see how votes go. Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. Second reading.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 9 to 4.
Third reading, moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Let's call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 9 to 4.
Okay, let's deal with the 3 addeds now. That's 632, Bill 633, and 634. First reading, moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Park. Call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 11 to 3.
Second reading, moved by Councillor Salee, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. And any speakers? Okay, we'll call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 11 to 2.
Third reading, Bill 632, 633, 634, moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Usher. We'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 11 to 2.
Colleagues, that is the term, 2014 to 2018. We'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Zafman, seconded by Councillor Usher. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Meeting adjourned.